Let's get started. Welcome to the joint session of the Civilian Review Board and the Police Commission. Commissioners and board members, in case you didn't know, this meeting is being recorded. Your microphones are on. We're being videotaped. So smile. So I would like to do a quick introductions, and I want to start with my right. Please state your name and your affiliation.
Carter Hawley, staff at the Police Commission.
Pete Kearns, Eugene Police Chief.
Bob Walker, Police Commission.
James Manning, Police Commissioner.
Deborah Velour with the CRB.
Steve McIntyre, CRB.
Tim Lowry, CRB.
Jim Garner, Police Commission.
Jesse Larkey, Police Commission.
Bernadette Conover, CRB Liaison to the Police Commission.
Tim Miller, Police Commission. George Rody, CRB.
Tamara Miller, Police Commission Vice Chair.
Carter, I understand that Caitlin is late and Mike Clark is not
Mike Clark is excused.
And JPRC? Okay, she might walk in. Would you mind, since I'm asking you, walk us over to the agenda review?
Sure, and let me explain ever so briefly about the videotaping. The city has decided that commission meetings should be videotaped. We are using Metro TV to videotape this meeting, so the cameras up on the corners and the microphones are live. It will not be broadcast live. We will post it tomorrow on the website. We are also recording with a police department recorder because the Metro TV may not be sustainable, but we're going to figure out what the most cost-effective and quality recording is. So we have redundant recordings for a while, but from this point forward, commission meetings will be recorded. Okay. The agenda is set up. The first part of the agenda is the joint CRB Police Commission meeting. It includes just a quick agenda review and the public forum, the report, the annual report from the CRB, and then discussion time. We have 45 minutes for that, assuming that we take 15 minutes for the first two parts. If we breeze through that, we got more time for the discussion. Then the Police Commission meeting, we organized it so that the chief's report comes early and invite the CRB members to stay for that portion, and then there's a break after that, so that would be a logical time. You're also welcome to leave at the end of the joint meeting. But after the conclusion of the joint meeting, we'll do comments from chairs and items from commissioners and review the materials for the second half of the meeting, hear from the chief, and then take a break. Then the commission will continue with their agenda, including appointing committee members to 2 committees and reviewing the bylaw proposed changes that started at the annual retreat in May, and hear the recommendation from the Policy Screening and Review Committee on the search and seizure policy, and then we'll be done.
Thank you, Carter. I want to now turn things over to our vice chair for public hearing.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And I have 2 folks signed up to speak today in our public forum. First is Carol Berg Caldwell, followed by Claire Surratt. Carol, you begin.
I don't mind you standing because it's pretty cozy in there. I'll just stand here. Kind of breathe. Okay, thanks. Carol Berg Caldwell, 2510 Augusta. First, I really appreciate that this joint meeting is happening. I know it's been planned for some months, and you all touch on many things that are somewhat in common, and to have this kind of connection and getting together, I think is just so great, and I'm glad you're doing it. But secondly, I wanted to commend the Search and Seizure Committee that has been also meeting for several months, and I see the hard work that has gone into this, and the staff support has been great, Mike Carter and Linda. And I also want to commend retired Captain Tilby, because certainly the gathered folks there had lots of questions, and he would be very responsive, and if he didn't have the answer, he certainly got back by the next meeting, or perhaps sooner through your emails. But this is such a vitally important thing to go over, because I certainly see that a lot in municipal court, that people just don't seem to have a real understanding about search and seizure. So at the very final meeting of this committee, I did proffer the idea because I know the Police Commission wants to do as much as they can to help community understandings, then maybe you could consider working with another organization to host a special evening to really underscore what this search and seizure is all about. For example, I heard at one meeting that they try very hard. They actually videotape before they search and seize and then try to get everything right back the way it's supposed to. And I think common misperceptions out there is that police just come in and throw things asunder and leave a mess. And so I thought that's just a small part of what could be shared with community, that our department does all that it can to return things as they find it. But there's a whole lot to this, so maybe there could be some kind of public event that could be co-hosted by Police Commission and other interested parties to actually inform people about the good works of the Search and Seizure Committee, their findings, but also maybe even go into the fact that EPD, through Chief Kern's leadership, had every officer brought more up to speed on constitutional rights and protections, and that was accomplished and actually is ongoing, I think, intermittently. So perhaps those two could be a special topic to really let the community of Eugene know that a lot of really good proactive steps are being taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next I have Claire Surratt.
Hi, I'm Claire Surratt. I'm here representing the ACLU of Oregon, and I'm also glad to see that this joint meeting was able to be arranged. I know that was something you guys have been trying to work towards for a long time. And I'm also glad to see that the Commission has made arrangements to tape your meetings, which I know is a budget constraint and an issue there, but I think it's worth the effort, so I commend you on taking that step. I also wanted to thank the Policy Screening Review Committee and Mr. Tilby, particularly for making an effort to try and include ACLU in your process and the review of this policy. I'm afraid we weren't able to participate as much as we would have liked due to vacation and other scheduling situations, but we do think that this draft policy is sound and an improvement over current policy. We hope that the training on this policy will emphasize the tricky nature of obtaining true consent from members of the public before conducting a search of a person or their belongings. This is an area where many people do not feel confident about their right to refuse a search and often feel intimidated by the presence of armed police officers asking if they can look in their bag. It's a fundamental right of all persons in this country to be free from unwarranted searches. And officers already have the discretion to search somebody without their consent if they have reason to believe they may be armed. So the effort made in this policy to clearly articulate how an officer should approach the issue of seeking consent and what this means is appreciated. We hope it will lead to better policing and a greater understanding that the impact of police searches has on individuals, especially when those searches don't result in an arrest, a ticket, or the discovery of any contraband. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That concludes our public forum. I'd like to turn the time back over to Carlos.
Thank you, Tamara, and thank you to the members of the public for coming out to speak to us. I want to once again welcome the Civilian Review Board and its members, and I want to turn over things to Tim Lowy for their report. I will ask members to hold your questions until he is done with his report. That will give us more time to ask questions. I will hope and I ask you to be respectful when he's speaking, and that's been a custom of you, and I expect that you continue to do so. Tim?
Thank you. Just one note about the joint meetings. Juan Carlos and Tamara and Steve and I had lunch about 6-8 weeks ago and discussed this, because one of the issues about joint meetings is always who gets the meeting night. In other words, whose night is the meeting going to be on? And what we decided we proposed was that that alternate from year to year, and the joint meetings occur every year in September after the break. So in that case, maybe we can look forward to doing this in about a year's time again. We're here tonight to listen to what you have to say, answer any questions you may have, and report on the activities and duties of the Civilian Review Board for 2010. The Civilian Review Board was founded by ordinance related to a charter amendment that was passed in 2005. It's part of a system of civilian oversight we have in Eugene, of which we are an incident review committee to the extent that we look at allegations of misconduct and review for the auditor's function and the office of the auditor's functions in terms of monitoring and intake and classification. You are the other side of that in terms of a policy body. We don't do policy, although we do make suggestions around looking at policies, and I noticed that warrantless entry and community caretaking, two that we identified in the last year, and search and seizure as well, are before you tonight, and I'm very glad to see that, having looked at the policies. In 2010, we had 10 meetings where we reviewed 7 allegations of misconduct and 4 service complaints. Our case reviews involve a presentation of the auditor on the nature of the case. We look at the intake and classification. We look at the investigation and monitoring, and we have full access to all the investigative materials, including call logs, in-car videos, etc. We look at the relevant policies and procedures, the policy and training considerations, and we comment on the adjudication recommendations. It's a pretty exhaustive process. A case review can take anywhere for an individual member 4 to 6 to 8 hours, depending on the particular case that's involved, in preparation before we get to the meeting. And then we spend quite a bit of time on it in the meetings. I would urge you, at any time you have the opportunity, to come and sit in on one of our case reviews, because they answer a lot of questions. Although we're trying to be very careful, and are very careful, not to use names to protect confidentiality of either complainants or officers or witnesses, it gives a good sense of what the Civilian Review Board does in terms of case reviews. The other thing that we focused on last year, aside from case reviews, was training for board members. We come from a variety of different backgrounds and activities. We have lawyers, doctors, business people, mechanics, and others. So people are less or more experienced in the terms of police policies and procedures. So we generally spend a good portion of each meeting going over a policy or training consideration. This month we generally kind of alternate between trainings on police policies and procedures and trainings from outside perspectives. Last year we had trainings on use of force. We had a training about cahoots from Whitebird Clinic, recruiting and hiring practices, party patrol, and 3 members attended the National Conference on Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. This year we've had a variety of trainings. This month we're getting a training from Lane County Shelter Care, who's going to talk to us about social service and human service reductions, as well as their interaction with police agencies and with the clients they serve. So we spend a lot of time, particularly since we have membership changes too, trying to get people up to speed as much as we can. When we do case reviews, there's an investigating officer who does a fact-finding report, does not make any attempt to try and adjudicate the case, but rather just to determine the facts around it. And that officer, is a sergeant actually, will be available for our questions, whereas the lieutenant, in this case, Lieutenant Scott Fellman of the unit, will be available to answer policy and procedure questions. We try and keep those two separate, so that in the sense of the officer who's doing the fact-finding doesn't seem like he's also trying to explain why the officers may have done the things they did. As I said, the case reviews are an ongoing activity of the board, and we generally decide on them 2 or 3 months in advance. So the other function that we have for the benefit of the council and the community is an evaluation of the work of the police auditor and the office of the police auditor. Last year's evaluation, I'm happy to say, involved 7 different dimensions, in which cases the office and the auditor met or exceeded all of them. That involved ethics, integrity, and independence, support to the board, community and citizen relations, intake and adjudications and appropriateness of that, reporting of the OPA, the Office of Police Auditor to the community and the board, judgment and knowledge. In no case did the auditor's office or the auditor not meet our expectations, and in one case he got the highest rating of all, which was that everyone said that he exceeded their expectations, and that was in the area of knowledge. And that probably shouldn't be a surprise to an auditor that comes from a city of some millions of people with 25 years of experience. But the lowest rating he got was where he met everybody's expectations, was on reporting. Of course, then 3 days later he handed us his 2010 annual report, which was a very impressive document, but we didn't have it at the time we did an evaluation. One of the things personally that I appreciate about the auditor's office and the auditor himself is when I, as a businessman and as a policymaker in this community, one of the things I'm always looking for is improvement in services. I think that you can always get better at what you're doing. And that is certainly something that hasn't had to be articulated to the auditor's office. I notice whenever we mention something like we talked about reporting the year before, reporting gets better right away. They're always looking for ways to improve. Another example of that would be the, which I think you're all getting copies of, the weekly updates or newsletters from the auditor's office. They're very helpful to us. They keep us apprised of what's going on, and I think they help keep the community apprised as well. So I'm going to make this short so you have time to answer questions if you have any, and go basically to the recommendations and conclusions. The recommendations and conclusions that we had, other than saying that we felt like the office was functioning as intended and improving, as well as the system of oversight we have in Eugene evolving, had to do with public information and disclosures, which the Attorney General was taking a look at the legislature. I don't know what the outcome of that is, but one of the concerns that we have, and at least personally, is if I could change one thing about the oversight system, it would be the transparency of the case files. And that's because we get, the materials are exhaustive and done well, and if the community could see the amount of effort that goes into an investigation of an allegation of misconduct, I think it would help improve the confidence that, in fact, officers can investigate officers and do well. So that's been an issue since the beginning with the oversight model. We just want to continue to highlight it. Another couple of clerical issues or issues that we would like to see cleared up is the definition of good cause. I believe the auditor's office is working with the city attorney. Currently, the ordinance says, except in the case of very serious allegations, that a complaint has to be filed within 6 months of the incident occurring, or good cause has to be shown, but there's no definition of what good cause might be, so we'd like to see something a little more in that regard. We'd also, in community impact cases, I'm not sure how familiar you have with our process, but all of our cases, with the exception of community impact cases, are closed case reviews, which means when we look at them, we're looking at them after they've been investigated and the adjudications have been made, ultimately by the chief of police. We're not looking at them to make a determination or to do any kind of investigation. We're looking at them because we're kind of monitoring the auditor's activity to see that cases, from our perspective, were investigated thoroughly and completely and fairly for all parties involved without bias. So the majority of cases we do are closed case reviews. In fact, all of them, with the exception of one a couple of years ago, have been closed case reviews. Community impact cases are those cases that rise to such a level and raise such a concern in the community that we look at them after the investigation is complete, but before a final determination or adjudication is made by the chief of police. In that case, it's a little different. The ordinance is very clear that the designation of community impact cases belongs with the auditor and the auditor's office alone. There are some reasons for that, but one of the things that we would suggest and have suggested to the auditor is that before he make that decision, he confer individually, possibly with members of the Civilian Review Board, about that. So, and lastly, there's the issue of reopening closed cases. The ordinance very clearly allows the board, in the case of a community impact case, to require that a case be reopened where it feels like it wasn't thoroughly investigated or there were lines of investigation that weren't followed or pursued. The charter allows for that, but doesn't make it clear that it applies only to the community impact cases. We're going to ask the council when we present this report to them, which will occur in October, that they consider modifying the ordinance to clarify that issue so that it's put to rest and get rid of that ambiguity. So So those are the things that we talked about and did. There's a summary of the cases we reviewed in the report, and I kind of want to thank all the other members of the Civilian Review Board, new and old alike, for the help and participation, and particularly Steve. He's the vice chair, and he's been inimitable in the way that he conducts his business. So, and the auditor's office, including Leah and Vicki, who's not here. Vicki joined us early last year, in November.
I did.
Yeah, and I know that she was a great help, has been a great help to Mark and to Vicki, and we certainly appreciate the work they do. So.
Thank you, Tim, for the report, and thanks for being prompt. You meant that. Do you have all the members of the CRB here?
No, Dr. Fontes is not here.
And
And Eric Van Houten is not
Okay,
here.
so there will be two more people that we might meet in the future. As Tim Lowy said, we expect to do this now at their house next year, perhaps in September. So we're looking forward to that. At this point, we will entertain questions. I'm going to put you in the queue, try to get my attention, and I will make sure that we have at least a chance to ask at least a question. If you have more, we will go a second round. I have first in the queue, Tamara.
I wanted to first thank the CRB for coming back to our CRB members for coming back to our meeting a second time after their visit in July and presenting the report to us. It was a very well-written report, and I'm particularly impressed that the report was written by the chair and the vice chair of the group, which is not always the case. I had two questions. One was about in your trainings. I noticed that they were from a variety of sources. How do you select what trainings you're going to have and who that training on any particular subject or issue is going to be provided by?
Well, we put together, with the help of the auditor's office, a list of training topics in the fall of last year, and we kind of went through those and identified which ones we were interested in, and then we talk about who may present. Obviously, when we did Cahoots, we talked to the Whitebird folks, since they have the Cahoots contract and have been doing it for 20-some years now. But we talk among ourselves about what training topics we may wish to choose, and then we talk about where the presentation may come from. In terms of policies, police policies, practices, and procedures, some of those come from within the department. The use of force training we got was from a consultant who does use of force trainings regionally, if not nationally. So that's how we do it.
And then, thank you, Tim. And then my second question was about process for case review selection. How do you decide amongst the many closed cases that you have to choose from? How does your group reach consensus about which cases you're going to review?
The case reviews can come three ways to the board. They can be recommended by the auditor, they can be selected by the board, or it can be at the request of a complainant, whereas the complainant is informed that we'll hear their case, but it will make no difference in the outcome of a closed case review. Every month, we get a summary of the closed cases that have been closed, and out of that list, we will discuss where we want to go in terms of picking those. Usually, we try and pick 2 or 3 months in advance, and we are always kept aware of cases that are coming that might be of interest. We pay particular attention to search and seizure, to constitutional right cases, to bias cases, but we also look every year at 3 or 4 service complaints to see that they are classified correctly and that they were investigated at least as well as possible.
I would just add to that you look kind of for reoccurring patterns as well to see if there may be some policy implications or something we can do a little different. So kind of look for different things, but then, different topics or issues, but then ones that have similarities that you're seeing reoccurring as well.
I have next Tim, followed by Jim and James. Before I go to Tim, I want to welcome both Kaylin and Kitty Peterson.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late, but that mayor stuff just keeps on going.
That happens. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you. I'm looking at the February 2010 case over here, and it says that the board concurred that policies relating to search and seizure be reviewed. And I'm wondering what what prompted you to want us to review that policy? Were there particular sections in that policy that caused you particular concern, or you felt needed updating? And I'd like to ask that question, and I have another one as well.
Okay. To answer the first question, it came up because of the chief's discussion of the topic of warrantless entries, which also came from the auditor's office as well. And warrantless entries is part of a search and seizure policy, or at least associated. And the whole business of search and seizure going in that case, which was a pretty notable case on the basis of information that turned out to be not accurate, seemed appropriate for a policy to be reviewed in that case.
On the bottom of that next paragraph, it says that you unanimously disagreed with the chief's adjudication. So what happens then? Is the adjudication, what happens then if you, what happened after that? You disagreed with what the chief did, and then what?
That's what happens, as we disagreed with the chief's adjudication. This is not an appellate body. It's not an investigative body. Our primary function is a quality control and performance evaluation function. What we look at is to make sure that cases from a civilian perspective or the board's perspective are investigated thoroughly and completely. But the discipline of police officers rests with the chief of police. And the adjudication of whether complaints are within policy or outside of policy also rests with the chief of police. In the case of community impact cases, we can weigh in before there's a final adjudication made, but in closed cases, we may disagree with an adjudication, but as far as the officer is concerned and his due process is involved, that closed upon the chief's adjudication.
Thanks.
Can I add something to that? We've also found that when we make our comments and someone from the police department is there, they often say, while it didn't fall in policy that this officer violated policy, that it was within policy, we have looked at whether or not it needs to be done differently in the future. So we get responses from the police department, oftentimes at our meeting that might not be reflected in the report, that say, we disagree that we think the officer did violate policy, but they're already kind of working on changing what the officer should be doing. So while we might not necessarily have an impact directly on this officer's, how they responded or whether they should have been gotten in trouble, I mean, obviously our discussions impact because the police officers, or the lieutenant and the sergeant, go back and say, we need to be doing this differently, and then it impacts their training schedule. So, I mean, I think to say that it doesn't nothing happens to that officer, he or she does not get dinged for what they did because we disagree with the chief, but it certainly impacts the police department.
So if I can follow up, did that happen with this? Did you get a conversation going or a response from a police department member from this particular one that, oh, we're going to do something differently? And I guess what I'm getting at here is, so you guys disagreed about how this was supposed to go down, how this was supposed to happen, and nothing changed because it was already closed, so it was done. So is there any knowledge or learning that comes out of this so that things don't go down this way the next time? And so I guess that's basically what I'm trying to find out.
I think this particular case was so fact specific that it was almost like a perfect storm of things that happened, that sometimes you can't really take away a particular training thing from one episode and apply it to other things, because the likelihood of that exact same situation happening in anywhere else is slim. But certainly they did take away from it, and they did say we need to look at search and seizure as to how we go in when a rental company says this apartment is not rented and no one should be in there, and so they go into it, and in fact it was rented out. They are now looking at, how do we make sure that that this one really wasn't rented out, and it was just because the person rented 11 and got there and didn't like 11 and then decided to move into 7 when they got on site, and so the rental company thinks 11's rented, but in fact they've moved into 7, and so when they see him in 7, so there's a lot of facts to it that really made it just kind of
non-representative.
I just would
Yes.
say I took from the conclusion of that meeting that there would be further discussion about how we might do things differently in this kind of a situation. So there was an expectation there would be some learning from this incident.
Thank you.
I have next Jim, followed by Jesse, and I have myself on the queue. Jim?
I want to thank the CRB for being here tonight and presenting the report. Very good report. Very good case studies, I thought. Unfortunately, Tamara took my questions. Sorry. But I did have one that kind of a follow-up on that. When you said that we sometimes select the cases, is it the full board, or is it when you and Steve get together? Or
it can be the full board. We sometimes do it at the meetings. We sometimes do it via email in terms of case selection. We'll do process discussions in email. We don't do policy or substantive discussions in email. Sometimes the board will say, we trust the two of you, and Steve and I will get together and talk to the auditor. Sometimes it'll be at the auditor's recommendation, because I think there's some interesting things that you may want to look at in this particular case, and we'll do it that way. And I would say that in all the cases we review, there's learning that comes out of it, and on our part and on the department's part. I can't count the number of times, because I'm not good once I get above my fingers, how many times the department has said, we need to look at our training on this because the policy's not real clear, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see some policy revisions that come out of the case reviews we do as well.
thank you.
Jesse?
My questions have been asked. Thanks.
And I have myself next in the queue. So, like Tamara, I also am taking interest in two areas, in training and also about transparency, but I'll get to that in a second. As far as training, I see in your introduction about the civilian rights and interaction with vulnerable communities. Is that still taking place? I did not see that in here. And how do you go about doing those two things?
Well, I'll start with that. Yes, it still takes place. The training that you didn't see it in here because we didn't have that training in 2010. We did have it in early 2011.
Okay.
We had a training between officers and officers' interaction with homeless communities, and officers investing homeless on homeless offenses, which there are quite a few of, unfortunately, in this community. We also had a training on crisis intervention training that the officers have, including populations and people who may be suffering from disaffective disorder or going through some sort of psychotic incident. So that's why it wasn't in the 2010 report, because it occurred in 2011. But one of the things we get, and you get as well now, weekly, is the most recent cases that have come out of the courts in relation to police activities. And well, I can't say I open and read every one of those links exhaustively. The ones that I do tend to look at real closely are the ones related to constitutional rights. So.
That ties into my second question about, it's only because it's under transparency, but what portions of your work can it be shared with the public? I know there's a lot of things only you have the privilege to see because of confidentiality and things like that. If I want to find out about a case that is ongoing, is there anything that I can learn besides going to the meeting?
The records of the police department in terms of disciplinary activity have been determined to belong to the police department. So we are not at liberty to release them or divulge them. So if you were to want to find out something about a particular case or a particular incident, that would be the guy to talk to. It would not be the Civilian Review Board.
But you can, like reading the minutes,
attending the meetings.
Attending some of the meetings, you can get a feel for the substance of what's at issue without seeing the records themselves. But you can't necessarily get to the core of everything in, just a few minutes.
And I will say that we have had on more than one occasion the complainants in cases listen to our deliberations around the investigations. Not necessarily because they wanted to try and change the outcome, but rather they wanted to see what we had to say about that. There one particular incident where that occurred I know the complainant came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for what you did. I understand a lot better what happened now." So.
And again, just to emphasize, those are closed cases. I also want to comment on the newsletter that the auditors is putting out. I thank you for putting us on the list. I'm assuming that it will be okay to also include the rest of the police commissioners. It's a great newsletter, so it's very informative. We also have one we put out every week, so I think some of you are also in that list. Any more questions before we move to the next segment? Tim?
Yeah, I did. Two questions. One is, it says in the March area that there was a POM section called the lack of knowledge of the law. I was kind of curious as to what that was and how that impacted that case. And then in September, it says another policy that was in need of immediate update having to do with the police dog. So I was wondering, I don't think we've had a police dog policy brought up here, so I was wondering if there were any other, I guess that's a question for the chief, if there are any policy change that has been made since September when they dealt with this about whatever they're referencing, a police dog or whatever. So the question, what is lack of knowledge of the law, and then was the police dog policy changed?
Well, I'm going to need to remind myself where we are here.
This one here.
The first part, Tim.
The police manual.
Yeah.
The police operations manual. That's what was alleged.
Right.
What
right.
he was in violation.
Yeah,
He or
but
she
what
was
is
in violation.
what is that?
Excuse me. So the first part of the question is for the members of the Civilian Review Board, and the second for the chief.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, if you know the answer to the first part there.
Sure, there's a policy that requires that officers have a knowledge of the law, and they can't exercise their authority without it, and they can be disciplined or reprimanded for not having a knowledge of the law in a particular circumstance.
Okay. There's a lot of knowledge, isn't it?
It is a lot of knowledge, and that's part of the reason they have ongoing service trainings. But yes, because the laws are constantly changing as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You want to
So
add?
it makes sense. This is referring to the interception of communication, which I think is kind of what your email was getting to earlier, whether it was okay for an officer to take someone's cell phone that was videotaping something. Oh, sorry, different one.
Yeah,
Okay.
Without the details, it's hard to remember which case it was.
Oh, this is a year ago.
Burglary.
No,
That's the September one.
Oh, the September.
March 2010.
Oh, March 2000 was the interception of communication. Right.
But not the high school one. This is after a bar incident.
It was a celebration, as I recall.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Where somebody was videotaping with their camera, and the officer said, "You're not supposed to be doing that," and that was the
Then they
allegation.
confiscated the phone or made them delete the
Yes.
video.
And it turns out that there isn't a law saying that you can take the phone.
Not in a public venue, right? You
The person was
possible to record it.
right, and the officer just was not aware that it was okay for this person to be recording with their video.
Right.
Chief, did you want to take the last?
Sure. And I'd be a little cautious with the details you're hearing here, because I remember them slightly differently, so we haven't been provided, in this report with the details of the case, but Mr. Lowey has summarized the issue pretty well. That there's certain laws officers should be familiar with, particularly when they're going to act on them in such a way that it'll infringe on somebody's liberties, and that was the case here. And then the canine case is one where the officer deployed the dog under circumstances where I felt it wasn't appropriate, and it became evident when we learned more about the training the officer had received and the interpretation of the policy at the time that we needed to make some clarifications with how that policy related to our use of force policy. So we changed, and I'm not going to be able to recite it for you here, but we changed some of the language in the canine policy at that time.
Is there a way we can see that new document?
Absolutely.
I can see that. Okay, great. Thank you.
Will you make another lap? That'd be great. And Bob?
I didn't have a question, I just had a comment, and I'd like to commend the board and their recent work. I followed this from the inception, and it hasn't always been this amicable a relationship. I think it's due to your professional ability to work with everyone that this speaks so well of our community that we're able to pull this off. There's a lot of animus in other communities, and it doesn't work very well, but the relationship with the auditor and his office and the way you handled recent cases that I've seen, been exemplary, and I appreciate the effort that everyone's making.
I just had one more comment I wanted to make.
Go ahead.
Because one of the things that we have identified and that I didn't comment on, that was in my notes, was following up with complainants, and that has gotten to be much better. Each complainant is surveyed and people follow up with them. One of the issues we had that brought this whole thing about was years ago, complainants felt like they weren't contacted after the investigations were complete, or that they didn't get a full explanation. The auditor's office has been doing a good job in terms of following up with people. And more often than not, even though they may not be satisfied with the outcome, they are satisfied with the service that they receive. And a lot of times, they understand better how the circumstance got to where it did. So, that's very helpful.
Next, Tamara Bernadette, and then we'll move on to the next segment with the CRB. Tamara?
I had a recollection, I know I told Tim this after we met for lunch, but now I can't remember. I think the police operations manual is online, on the, did I say on the police website, or I can't remember now. Is that what I said, Tim?
It is now online, actually.
On the police department's website, I believe. So,
Oh.
do you have any policy?
It's up to date.
Yeah, but what you won't, if you don't mind,
Right,
what
yes.
you won't see is what the changes were to the canine policy. So we can provide you with the old policies so that you'll see what changed.
Last, Bernadette?
Yeah, I was just going to note that I know the dog case, actually, I think the interim policy went in before we even got the review for the CRB. Same thing happened with Taser and there were 3 policies I remember that by the time we were reviewing it, they had already put an interim policy in place. So it kind of took away a little of our thunder that, we wanted to tell them that they needed to change something, and it was like, oh, they'd already done it. So I think knowing that it's going to get reviewed has really moved things along with regards to, because, before we would review something, we'd see something wrong, we would come to the police, we being the CRB, would come to the police commission. Police commission's already got their agenda set for a year. We have to wait until it's agenda setting time and then try and convince enough members to put it at the top of the, hierarchy to get on the calendar. So I think the police department has been remarkable in how quickly they respond when a case like this happens, that they don't wait for the CRB to review it. They're already looking at an interim policy. So.
Thank you, Bernadette. That's actually a pretty good segue to our next segment. You want to lead us through that, Tim?
Sure. I guess. This is a segue about the relationship between the CRB and the Police Commission. Okay. I just wanted to comment on Bob's comment before I forgot it. Bob, I appreciate the comment very much, but I think every one of us on the CRB knows we're just one incident away from being on the front page of the paper again. So that's always the case in this town. In 1998, the first charter amendment was proposed for civilian oversight of police in Eugene. It did not pass, but as a part of that proposal before the voters was a policy body and a incident body. The policy body was what turned into the Police Commission in 1999. So even though we didn't have oversight initially, the Police Commission was established to look at police policies. Although, as you know, you are precluded by ordinance from looking at specific incidents or the actions of specific officers. So that carried forward until 2005, at which time the Police Commission took on the issue of looking again at civilian oversight for the city of Eugene. The commission spent 18 months looking over it with dozens, literally dozens, more than 100 meetings of committees and subcommittees, and 7 or 8 public forums, including many presentations to neighborhood groups and interested parties and stakeholders. And they came back to the council in 2005 with a proposal for an oversight system that still involved, as far as the civilians were concerned, both a policy body and what is now the Civilian Review Board. It was always the intention that the Civilian Review Board would not have the opportunity, and the Police Commission on its side would not have the opportunity to look at either incidents and policies and do their work. So it was expected the other would do that. That's why Bernadette is not just a liaison of the Police Commission, but actually a member that is appointed by the council, because her job, among other things, besides bringing her inimitable wisdom into this board, is to bring to it issues that arise, either training issues or policy issues that arise during our reviews. That's also why anybody else that's here for Bernadette can't vote in her case, because your bylaws, as I recall, don't allow voting by proxy. So that is the interplay of the system. The other part of it has to do with the chief of police and the auditor's office and how well they work together. And I don't consider it to be stealing our thunder when the police make adjustments to policies in advance of when we review cases. I think that's exactly how it was intended to work, because we want them to be nimble and be able to adjust and address issues that arise either in complaints or in the community. Certainly I expect they will apprise you of that. It's not necessary always to apprise us of it, but we're kept pretty well in the loop. The other part of it I think that works very well is the auditor keeping the department and this board and the chief of police, as well as the CRB, informed of changes that are occurring nationally around police policy and procedure issues. That has shown up most recently in the weekly reports that you're getting, as well as the information that we are provided. So that's how the system evolved over a period of 20 years, and that's the intended purpose. We do raise policy issues, but more often than not, by the time we get to raising them, they've already been raised by either the auditor's office or the chief of police or the police commission itself. So that's the interplay.
Before I open up for questions, I want to comment to you that I am pleased that that's not holding you back, nevertheless, to make those recommendations, because it occurs to me that it is a complementary relationship that we can take it to a different and much higher level. I see that there are some policies that have been adopted in the interim while the police commission in this case looks at them. But it doesn't mean that something will not be documented and that this body looked at it or recommended, or that we making some recommendations. For the most part, that has been working very well. I understand that the police department, in some cases, they have to have something to go by. We can't just let the officers out there without any guidance. And in some ways, the policies are guidance how to do the job. So I also don't think it's, crushing your thunder or anything, but it's really you doing your job, which I appreciate. In terms of communications, and I know you wanted to bring that up, and I think this will be the time. What can we do differently? What opportunities are there for us to increase communications?
Well, I've never known Bernadette to be shy about communicating, but one of the things that we talked about when we were at lunch was giving a quarterly update to the police commission from the Civilian Review Board, status update. And I think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a great idea because I'm going to end up being the person that writes it, but I think it's a good idea. So it will also make writing the annual report a little bit easier because it will allow us to summarize the cases we're looking at and the issues that we have evolved. So I think you can expect that after the end of this quarter that you'll be getting something from, probably 1 or 2 pages of a status update on our activities. And we'll probably pass it on to the council as well. Since we write it once, we probably might as well copy it to 2 people. I think the communications work most effectively when they stay open and people listen to one another. My experience has always been that if you try and formalize it or put it into too strict of terms, you end up missing things because the form takes over the function. I don't think that in the work that we've done that anything has been missed. In fact, I was very pleasantly surprised to see that you were reviewing the search and seizure policy tonight. I didn't expect you to be that far along in that process from when it came about, but I do think status updates, quarterly updates, and certainly as everybody who has communication with me knows that my cell phone is on most of the things that I send, and as is my office phone, so feel free to pick it up if you want to talk to me.
I think the annual is kind of like an annual standing meeting would be helpful as well.
Right. Joint meeting.
Any other CRB members have any other comments or any perspectives on perhaps any ways that we can work better together or back and forth communication? Tim?
That was going to be my question, is what can we do to better communicate with you guys?
Well, there are times that you will hear about concerns that we will not hear about. There are times that people will show up to talk to you when this is not the appropriate place for them to be talking. So if you would send them in our direction and let them know about the function of the auditor's office, then that would work. That would be helpful. We are not, by ordinance, a representative body. We are a quality assurance and performance evaluation body. So our function is a little different in that regard. But certainly I'm aware, pretty closely aware of what it is the police commission's doing on a regular basis. But if you do have issues that you think, or incidents that you're aware of that you think we should consider, don't hesitate to let us know. And similarly, when we have concerns that we think you should be looking at, whether they be training concerns or policy or procedure concerns, we will certainly let you know.
Tamara?
I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased that we have the opportunity to have increased interaction with the CRB membership. I think that's a really a positive step in the right direction. So I'm glad that that's where the leaders of the groups are leading us.
I'm next in the queue. I appreciate you saying for us not to make it too formal. I concur. At the same time, there will be and should be some areas in which we have to make it a little bit more formal, because it has to take a circle or a wraparound. For example, if your group is sending a policy for us to take a look at or review or consider, it has to be some kind of formal mechanism that we can get back to and say, here's what we are. I know Bernadette kind of touched on that already, that this body has a work plan that we have to present to the city council, and sometimes we don't have the ability to move things forward. But at the same time, we want to make sure well, here's what we heard from you, here's where we are with this. That's something that I would encourage our leadership to have that, at least that mechanism, more formalized. Anybody else have any more comments?
Just a little add-on. It's just, I think it's really, if we do this right, it'll come up at the same time every year, and you'll know when it's going to come, and it'll come in the right order so that everything just moves in an expected pattern, so we won't be grappling for trying to figure out when we're going to get together. We will know that on an annual basis, and I think that would be helpful for everybody.
Thank you, CRB, for your time and your willingness to come and meet with us. I am sorry, I apologize. I wanted to acknowledge the police auditor and police. Thank you. Lieutenant Feldman and senior staff from EPB. Thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay over if you like. Next on our agenda is comments from chairs and items from the commissioners. And I'll start with Tim. I'm looking right at you. You walk this way.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I have something I'm going to read. At our most recent Policy Review Committee meeting, some things occurred which disturbed me greatly, so much so that I felt I needed to say something about it tonight. That meeting was attended by all 4 present members and Linda Phelps. In the room were 2 other commissioners, both who expect to be confirmed as members of that committee tonight, plus a frequent attendee, Carol Bird-Caldwell, and Chuck Tilby attended via the phone link. The chair shared that both the ACLU and Auditor Gissner had provided input, or hoped to provide input, pertinent to the policy we were to discuss, but that input came in after our deadline and therefore wasn't available to us in our scheduled decision-making process. Additional input was provided in a document distributed just before the meeting by Jesse, who spoke to it during his 3-minute public comment period. I made 2 separate motions designed to provide the community an opportunity to, or the committee, an opportunity to thoroughly review that input by delaying our decision or by allowing Jesse and Bob and Carol to join us at that night's discussion. Both those motions failed, and we ended up voting for a policy without their input. This is one of the 5 purposes of our commission. Quote, increase communications between police and the community, leading to a greater understanding of the preferred policing alternatives for the city. And our bylaws read, Article 7, Section 10, in general, communication to and from the public during meetings occurs during the public comment or community dialogue period. And except for the right to vote and to move a motion, the privilege of the floor may be granted to any member of the public at the discretion of the chair. In addition, Article 7, Section 12 says to further its mission, the Commission may agree to invite specific group representatives, civilians or staff to participate with the Commission in the evaluation, discussion, and problem solving of specific issues or policies. So clearly our bylaws provide these 2 ways to invite community participation beyond the in general comment periods. The bylaws envision doing so to help achieve our purpose. At the time, I could see no logical reason to exclude those folks from the table. A stated reason that we had to fear setting a precedent seemed to me unfounded, and another that we had a schedule to keep seemed trivial to me, considering what an important policy, as underlined by the Civilian Review Board tonight, that we were discussing. The only other explanation I could see, besides those 2 for limiting the discussion, was to diminish the input that we could have received. Another of the Commission's charges is to, quote, provide fair opportunities for the public and criminal justice professionals to comment and participate in the Commission's work, recognize the interconnectedness of the criminal justice system. The actions of that meeting, denying available and important input from the community, run counter to that goal, especially when at the conclusion of the meeting, a commissioner asked to be sure scheduling allowed ample opportunity for police officers to be present and provide their valuable input. If we are to maintain our credibility as a public resource in the public safety accountability circle, we must not be seen as encouraging input from police officers while discouraging input from members of the public, the police auditor, or other police commissioners who may champion a public first point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Bernadette?
We did not meet, the CRB did not meet in August. Our next meeting will be next Thursday in this room at 5:30. You are all welcome to come and attend and see what we do.
Jesse?
I'm not familiar enough with the format of the meetings to know if this is a time that I would address the search and seizure policy. I think I'm just going to go ahead and wait until we're discussing it to give my comments on it.
Okay. Tim?
I wanted to again thank the CRB and the auditors for being here tonight. And I wanted to comment that I think the relationship between the CRB, auditor's office, and the chief can sometimes be antagonistic, but in this case, in a lot of jurisdictions, is probably is antagonistic. In this case, I think I see they're all pretty much working for the same goal, to improve policing for our city and our community, and I think that's great. And I also wanted to, say that I definitely appreciate that as being a citizen in the city, that those are the steps that everybody seems to be taking. To me, it's very good. I also wanted to state that both myself and my wife will be joining the Citizens Police Academy this session. So starting next Tuesday, we'll be starting our training with them. Thank you.
James, you're next.
I was looking at the agenda, and I didn't see normally where we would have committee reports, and I understand the reason for that. But out of yesterday evening's committee report, the Outreach and Resource Committee, one of the members had formally discharged themselves from that particular committee, Linda, and I think that Linda did. She was a great contribution to the committee at the time. But unfortunately, there are other things that have kind of weighed a little heavy, and she had to separate herself. So that left one chair open available. We discussed it, and there was a recommendation that was given, but we all came to the conclusion that this may be the appropriate time to extend that offer if there's anyone, new commissioners or old commissioners, wanting to serve on the Outreach and Resource Committee. I would like to know who it is, and then if there's only one, then I would ask that the full commission take action and vote that person in tonight instead of going through issuing letters and the likes. So, if there's anybody that's interested? One? Thank you very much. Again, we want to welcome you, and I will motion that she is accepted.
Caitlin.
Yeah, it's kind of turnover. Yeah, okay. Caitlin is accepted to the Outreach and Resource Committee.
The committee, the Outreach and Resource Committee, has to be the one seconding that request and the motion. And then, thank you. Remember, any discussion on that motion to extend an invitation or recommendation for membership to Caitlin?
Who's on the committee?
Yes. Tim.
Bernadette asked who was on the committee.
Tim, Tamara, James, Jim, and I. Any discussions on that motion? Excuse me.
No.
Yep. Go ahead.
Now we vote?
All in favor?
All in favor of extending the invitation? This is just a committee. Aye.
The member on the Outreach and Resource Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
This is just for the committee itself.
Opposed?
And now you're going to be asking the police commission to appoint
It is passed by the Outreach and Resource Committee. Now it's coming to the full commission. All right.
I move that we appoint Caitlin to the commission, to the committee.
To the Outsourced Resource Committee.
Yeah, the out
Okay.
resource committee.
I second that.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Any discussions on the motion to extend to appoint, not to appoint Caitlin to the committee?
Sure we don't have to go to city council for this?
I'm assuming Caitlin did accept. You did volunteer. Okay. Now, for commission, I want to ask you for a vote to appoint Caitlin Lange to the Outreach and Resource Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That passes unanimous. Welcome to that committee.
Just to let you know that the committee has also changed its meeting dates. It's the first Wednesday of the month. We chose the first meeting for Wednesday of the month so that the committee will have a report that we could share at the next full commission meeting. And it is subject to change based on the appropriate tasks that are assigned to the Outreach and Resource Committee, and we'll make adjustments accordingly.
Thank you, James. And I apologize for not having formally your committee on the agenda. That's just, I'll take responsibility for that. And I think it worked out well. Thanks for your flexibility.
We got business taken care of.
Bob, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I just would like to say, Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege, that I felt that that committee meeting, the recent Policy Screening Review Committee, was handled very well. I did not feel in any way left out of the conversation. Contrary, I was able to speak my mind completely at the presentation of public comment period, and obviously got my points across very well. And I think we have opened this committee, Policy and Screening Committee, to public input from both the ACLU and other groups, and anyone who has wanted to speak to us has certainly had an influence on us, especially in the case of the ACLU, who brought to our attention some very important areas that we need to look at, and changes were made. So I believe we did complete the mission, and I just wanted that as my personal privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin Lange, is it Lang? Not Lange, sorry. Lang. Go ahead.
I just
just want to say sorry for being late. My boss just doesn't want to let me go some days. So, and secondly, thanks for appointing me to the committee. I'm excited and glad to be here. Thanks.
Great.
Kitty?
I guess I will tell Jim that I'm joining him. I was invited to be on the Citizen Police Academy too, so I'm going to be doing that as often as I can make it, and look forward to that starting next week.
And Caitlin is too.
Oh,
yeah, I will be there
we
as
are.
well.
All right. So, party. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, and I don't know whether we're going to hit this as we go through our evening's agenda or not, but just from the email I get and the contacts I have, I feel that there's a increasing and broad concern about neighborhood pressures from behavioral issues out in the community, and seems like there's a rash of break-ins and things of that sort that are happening in various places around the community. So I just want to express my, I have to lean on the chief for statistics. They either bear that up, because when you get a lot of contact, it can either reflect something that's real, or they can just reflect something that's bubbling at the moment. But I feel a real concern about what I see happening in the community with that sort of combination of our economy and depletion of social service resources, and some increased people not getting services, and therefore you have an increase in behavioral issues as well as some criminal activity. So it is something that I think our council is going to be have to face as we look out into the future, because unless something changes pretty rapidly, I see this as something that's building and not something that's going away. And so you will all be at some point faced with the way that you intersect with this issue for our community too. And I just my radar is really up right now, because I think we seem to be having a lot of converging pressures on our community right now that I think, for some people, and rightly so, raise issues of public safety, and for some people, rightly so, raise issues of how we deal with people who are struggling. And those things are very complex and difficult. So I just want to express and get that on your radar.
Thank you, Mayor. And for me, I just wanted to say thank you to the public that do come, and sometimes it's people that are committed to come and listen to our work and see our work, especially in the committees. And sometimes we have the same people, but there's some people that are dedicated to the outcome. In the committees that I've been a part of, we make a point of opportunities in 3 different ways. Number 1, we have a public input, just like we do at the Police Commission. And number 2, we have a public dialogue that usually happens at the end of our meeting. Dialogue is really back and forth. There's not even a queue. We ask people to give us their opinion about how the policy is going or general input. The bylaws was cited earlier, one of our commissioners, about including people. I expect that all the committees will have sent information or emails or send a call for feedback, and I believe that the committees have been doing that. Sometimes people may not have done in time or maybe at the last minute, but that continues to be the practice. I will continue to encourage this and any other committees, this meaning the PRC, which I'm the chair of, to continue and solicit recommendations or feedback that was done timely. And with that, we also encourage all the police commissioners to send feedback. Of course, that includes the public. The police commission and the committees, when we set up how we're going to do some things, we established a protocol. The protocol happens to be for this committee, the PRC, by when do we want the feedback, specifically for the police commissioners. For example, when we're soliciting, I want to make sure that others have a copy of anything, a copy of a policy we might be working. I found a wonderful policy from Denver that I might be working on. I want everybody else to have a copy of that. We have established a protocol by when we need to send that in so that the committee has a chance to digest and discuss it. I'm not saying that if you bring it to the committee that will not be discussed, but that's a protocol that we have been following with that committee. Same thing with the police commission. You will have to have those documents, whatever you might have in mind, to our analyst 10 days before so that the public can also see that. So I'm happy to report that that has been met. Of course, we were welcome to have a discussion. The floor is given to experts by the chair, and that is in our bylaws. Next item on our agenda. Wait a minute now.
Actually, I don't have anything to say. Pass.
I'll give you that one at the end. Next item on our agenda is, well, we did material review already, so why don't we go right to the minutes? James?
Oh, no, we're looking at the minutes, right, for approval of the minutes. I'll just wait because I don't have any exceptions to them. I think they're good, so I'll just wait. Anybody else may have something.
Are there any additions, deletions of? Jim?
Let's see if it's got a page number on it. On page 3, toward the middle there, Tamara is called Mr. Miller.
Oh, I even missed that.
It's about the middle where it has Ms. Miller in the first line, but the second one where it says speaking to Mr. Lowry's concerns, Mr. Miller, that may want to be Ms. I don't think Jason was here that night, but sure.
Are there any other corrections, deletions? I hear none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Bob, thank you for second. Discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Same sign. That carries unanimous. Thank you.
All right.
Next, very own chief. You're going to have a PowerPoint?
Yeah, we will, but I'll start with this first. Again, this is the outline of my presentation was established a couple of years ago when I asked the police commission what they'd like to hear from the chief each month. So that's what you'll hear first, and then I have a presentation on some operational things. First of all, in terms of strategies, we are still refining our realignment. As of August 1st, the city is divided into at Jefferson Street roughly and the river, east and west. Captain Stronach is responsible for all policing on the east side of town, and Captain Rex Barong is responsible for all policing on the west side of town. The benefit of that is that when neighborhood behavior crime problems emerge, I can assign it to a captain. The captain and 2 lieutenants will work on it. And the neighborhood problems that we're working on right now are in Train Song from west to east. Train Song, Whitaker around the Scobert Park, downtown, and West University. And then there is an emerging issue around the Whitebird Clinic, which is kind of an interesting neighborhood problem that won't be easy to resolve. And I can talk more about that in a little bit. So the realignment is becoming, I think will become a pretty powerful tool in our effort to reduce property and behavior crime. And then our gang, the status of our gang reduction strategy is that the police department has established an ad hoc investigative team made up of detectives and patrol officers that will receive extra training in the identification of street gang members and crime and related crimes, and will respond to certain offenses when they occur and help with investigations. And will also participate in security responsibilities like Wayne County Fairgrounds and other public events. I'd like to get the Child is Missing program on your agenda someday. Detective Matt Herbert has kind of led the department towards using that particular product. It's a way for the department to participate in the Amber Alert program, but it's also a predatory sex offender, a system that allows us to notify neighborhoods when a predatory sex offender resides in their neighborhood. It's a little scary to conduct those kinds of notifications. You don't want to do them in cases where a young man, for example, when a young man had a consensual, and I use that term carefully because anyone under the age of 18 isn't considered able to consent to sexual intercourse with an adult, but is involved with someone just under the age of 18 and is later convicted of a sex offense. We wouldn't want a notification system that would require we tell the whole neighborhood that guy is now living in a neighborhood. A predatory sex offender, the determination of a designation of predatory sex offender is done by the state. They use a product, an instrument known as the Static 99R, and Detective Herbert can provide details on that when he presents. And what it does is it ensures that only a very small percentage of people who are sex offenders, who are convicted sex offenders, fall into this very serious category of predatory sex offenders. In Eugene, for instance, 831 sex offenders reside here. 15 of those have been designated as dangerous predatory sex offenders. We've used this system a couple times, and it's interesting enough that I think you ought to know a little more about it. And then we have the Prevention Convention is coming up on October 1st, and we are in need of volunteers. So if you don't have responsibilities, either as a CRB member or a Police Commission member at the Prevention Convention, Sergeant Lisa Barong is accepting volunteers right now. We have about a dozen sworn vacancies, and we're finishing up a hiring process, starting another hiring process. We're down, I think, a couple of sergeants. We're about ready to start another promotional process for that. We have 13 dispatch vacancies. This is a pretty serious problem for us. We're authorized 45 dispatchers and call takers, so 13 represents a significant portion of the workforce, which means that the remaining employees are often drafted. They're up to about 9 or 10 drafts on average each month, which is a significant demand on their private lives. So this is a chronic condition with 911 centers. Last year our staffing was very good, one of the best in Oregon, perhaps the best in Oregon, and everyone was envious of us. And now, a year later, we have a very difficult problem. We've been here before, too. Our FY12 budget looks good, which is what I have said for the last 3 years at this time, and I don't anticipate that we'll have to cut back, but I've said that also in the last 3 years, and every January we've had to draw back a little bit. So hopefully that isn't the case here. The city's finance division gets its most accurate prediction of what revenue, property tax revenue will be in the fall. So probably in October and November we'll know what next year looks like, but right now we're predicting a $4 or $5 million deficit, and we're going to target something around $3 million in reductions or new revenue for FY13, the whole city. A few incidents that I brought with me. Now, normally I gather these from our media releases, and I decided this month, and I may do this in the future, to use a different resource. This is what each patrol sergeant and our dispatch supervisors give a summary of the significant calls for service that happen in the shift. So I thought I'd just share a few of those with you. On August 22, there was a possible gunshot from an apartment in West Eugene, and when officers responded, they found out that a man there had threatened his girlfriend with a gun and had considered suicide. On that same day, a man took his girlfriend to a bar and then From there, they got into an argument in the car. He pushed her out of the car, and the assault resulted in a compound fracture to her right arm. In another incident at the Whitebird Clinic, a man attempted to stab his ex-girlfriend with a knife. Other homeless people interceded, and she didn't want to press charges. I don't want to go through all of these, but in a case downtown, our officers found a person who they thought had succumbed to heat exhaustion, and when they tried to wake her, she assaulted them, and she was taken into custody. On August 26th, a number of people broke into the Eugene Hotel, and from the roof where they were drinking alcohol, they tossed bottles to the ground, nearly striking a few people, and they were arrested. On August 31st, officers tracked down the suspect from a hit and run and found him at a house in West Eugene, and ended up in a lengthy physical fight with that person, one of the most difficult fights one of the officers had experienced in their career. No instruments were used, no taser, no police baton. One officer lost their flashlight, and a woman who lived at the house grabbed the flashlight and helped and struck the person quite a few times with it, but a pretty difficult, and because so many officers were tied up on other calls, it took some time to respond. In an incident where this is kind of interesting with the availability of closed-circuit television and surveillance systems, a business in West Eugene found a briefcase in their dumpster. When they checked their video, they could see who had left it there and the license plate of the vehicle. It was a stolen briefcase, and they returned it to the owner, and we'll track down who left it there. On September 2nd, we got a call where a man had pointed a shotgun at the neighbor's son, and I don't know from this how old the son was. Officers responded, and the victim didn't want to press charges. Some of these are a lot more interesting when the call comes in than when the officers arrive and learn what happened. At the end of July, there was a case in Eugene where a man had pushed his girlfriend down in their living room. She'd fallen against a glass coffee table and sustained a severe laceration from her scalp halfway down her back, which is considered to be an assault too by the district attorney's office, a felony. Our officers spent some time trying to find him. He's a prolific property offender, and on September 4th, one of our officers spotted him in a car, tried to stop him, pursuit. The officer used a pit maneuver, which you've learned about, and the guy ran. Our canine captured him. He sustained some injuries and was treated. And he was arrested for all of those, the things I've already mentioned, and the car he was in was stolen. On September 5th, we got a call that a man was chasing people around the area of Broadway on Willamette with a pistol and was shooting at them. Turned out that when officers arrived, what had really happened is there was a fight in the Broadway Plaza, and to break up the fight, somebody pulled out a gun and cranked one off and then ran from the area. That same night, officers were dispatched to a man stabbing a woman at 5th and Blair. When they arrived, they found it was actually a suicidal subject who'd been stabbing herself. On September 4th, someone called in, reported that they'd been assaulted and then run over by a vehicle by several street gang members. On September 6th, we arrested a person out of a stolen vehicle. There was an attempt to locate in heirs that a detective had placed in there because they needed to interview that suspect about a previous case, probably one in which he was a suspect. The officers properly booked the suspect into the jail, and before a detective could get there, within a couple of hours, he'd already been released. And then went to, I couldn't help but share this one with you. We were dispatched to a loud noise complaint at some apartments in West Eugene. It's not important to know where. And because 20 people were dancing in a nearby basketball court. So officers responded, and they found it was a dance class for 4-year-olds. And then this is, you probably, if you've been watching or reading about our property crime problem, you know that one method of committing burglaries is to knock on the front door and go, and if nobody answers, go around and back and enter. In this particular case, that's exactly what the suspect did. The resident was slow to get to the door, opened it, startled the burglar, who apologized and went across the street, did this exactly the same thing, while the victim from the first place watched him commit that burglary. And we're still trying to track him down. We have a good description. And then I'll try and do both these things. Yeah, this is, there we go. Okay. The county is considering a $200,000 cut to Health and Human Services, which might result in a reduction in services to the Buckley House. Steve Manella, who runs the Human Services Department over at the county, is looking for other funding. The City Council has set aside funds to adjust for this very thing, hoping that it wouldn't happen. Part of our realignment has been to divide our property crimes unit in half working on one side of the town, the other half working on the other, each with a sergeant. This is a model we're experimenting with. There aren't many departments our size that do that, but it is consistent with the theory that when a team of employees, along with a supervisor, have an area of town that they're responsible for, they tend to find innovative ways to reduce crime. So we'll see how that goes, and then if it isn't as successful as I hope it is, I've told the detectives and sergeants they're welcome to come up with an even better method if they can. And I hope, and I suspect they probably will. I'll talk a little more about our gang prevention strategy here in a minute, but I'll just cover it real quick now. The street gang, the near future objective is to host locally a street gang summit for schools, police, DYS, social service organizations that serve youth, and to bring in speakers from other parts of the country who have successfully implemented gang reduction strategies in their communities. In the interim, we've been meeting with leadership within African American and Black community and Latino community to make sure that we're having a face-to-face conversation about what the nature of the local street gang problem is and what our department's efforts are, and that we together need to come up with a good solution for this. I'm doing that for this reason. First of all, it's important to know that the street gang problem in Central Lane County is not a race-based problem. We don't have African American gangs and we don't have Latino gangs, but the other truth is that there is a disproportionate number of Latinos and African Americans in street gangs. So our community is going to be seeing, as we step up our enforcement, our community is going to be seeing pictures of young Latinos and Blacks, and that may cause some profiling or some stereotyping to occur. And I also know that it's communities of color fear profiling by police. So I want to reassure them that we're aggressively training our officers to know a street gang member and they see one, and to be able to discern the difference between someone who isn't a member of a street gang, and also for them to be aware that we have no control over what the media does with the images that they take when we arrest somebody, but the media are among those that we're informing about all this. That's one reason that I've been meeting with them. The other is that there is the community is very motivated to get after this problem of street gangs, particularly our school districts, Springfield, 4J, and Bethel. So we'll be working together. We'll put together a developmental team to put on this summit probably early next year, and I think that'll result in something that'll be good for our community. And then we've had some listening sessions in the last month, one with veterans and veteran advocates just last Thursday night, and then we wrapped up a series of meetings with communities of color, listening sessions. All right. Yeah, you'll have to work that thing for me. Now we've done it. Thank you. We've had, now every week, you know that we go over our crime analysis mapping with the patrol watch commanders and many other supervisors in the department, and then every month each of the watch commanders gives us a presentation on what their efforts have been to reduce crime in the previous month and what effect they think those have had, what's working, what's not, and what their frustrations have been. We have property crime hotspots in beats 3, 4, and 5, which is southeast, southwest, and Whitaker area, roughly. And a growing stolen vehicle problem, particularly in beat 5, which is Bethel. What you see here over on the far left is that, first let me tell you that we have been relying on AIRS, which is verified report, is data verified by police reports and follow-up investigations to do our mapping. The problem with that is that the information is delayed. What we need is 24-hour live information about where the crimes are happening so that we can adjust fluidly to them. Pretty soon we're going to go from using AIRS to using CAD data. The upside to CAD data is you got it right away, so we can easily produce 24-hour reports. These are weekly. The downside to using CAD is that there's about a 3 or 4% error rate. Someone will call in and it sounds like a burglary, the officer will go out and it's a trespass, for instance. What we learn also is that, particularly over the summer months when people come home and discover burglaries, is that the reporting is a little bit delayed. But in the week that's represented here, we've received 18 burglary reports that we've investigated, 11 stolen cars, 32 car break-ins. But we know that there's 14 more, you look at the bottom, there's 14 more burglaries that we'll see that occurred last week. 3 more stolen cars, 3 or 4 more car clouds. At any rate, it looks like it's not really good to judge by this, but it looks like in the last few weeks our property crime rate might be ticking up slightly. Okay. The 4-week look is that we've had 91 reported burglaries, but you remember from the last, in 4 weeks, but you remember from the last slide there's 14 that haven't been reported yet, so what's that, 105 burglaries, which is above, that says 2011, August 10, September 2011. It's actually 2010. Last year, during the same period, there was 103. So we're at the same, we've had the same number of burglaries probably in this last month than we had a year ago. In 2009, there was 154. We have some control charts I'll show you here in a minute that'll be helpful. But what you see is that these little green squares, those are car break-ins. The blue squares are burglaries, and the red squares are stolen autos. And we average about, our 5-year average is about 250 car break-ins a month, about 85 burglaries a month. And then the number of stolen cars has come way down to about 30-some a month, and I don't remember what the 5-year average is off the top of my head. Okay, on the east side of town, this is what you see here is basically the Ferry Street Bridge neighborhood. The 1-week look isn't too horrible, but we know that there's an underreporting of car break-ins. There's 100% reporting of, 99 to 100% reporting of stolen cars, because when you come out in the morning, you need to drive somewhere, and you report that your car's been stolen. Most burglaries are reported. So this isn't too bad and then the 4-week look is pretty typical for that part of town. This is Kins Row, oh, wait a minute, this is Kins Row over here, I think, if I got that right, this area, and as the students move in, those numbers will go up. Beat 2 is downtown, and a little part of West Eugene is Chambers on this side, and Parkway over there. This is a pretty good situation for the downtown area. The more officer-initiated activity we engage in, the less property crime is, and it doesn't really matter what our officers are working on. If it's behavior crime or traffic enforcement, the more we do in an area, the less crime, other property crime there is. Okay. And then Beat 3, this is where the West University neighborhood is. You've heard me talk about this before. That's our most enduring property crime problem. And most of those are most of those burglaries are suspects just walking in, open doors and windows. The car thefts from cars, the same, unlocked doors and windows and valuable things left out that are easy to take. West University, another part of our strategy is to work closely with parole and probation. We get information from the jail, so as you probably recall, in the middle of July, the sheriff reduced the number of jail beds by 84, so now there's only 168 local jail beds, which means the property crime offenders that we put in jail are released immediately. Any one property crime offender is committing just a handful of these crimes that I've been talking about every week. So when one of them isn't locked up, our numbers multiply. When we reduce by 84 jail beds, our crime rate will go up unless something miraculous occurs. And Beat 4, this is kind of the Churchill Southwest area. We've had a burglary problem that has kind of migrated around the area there, and most of these in the neighborhood occur where someone knocks at the front door and walks around and back and breaks in. We are gathering information about the suspects that have been seen there, and then this is just a blow up of the area where we're seeing the highest concentration. We know that these characters, we have real pictures, but we're not able to show them here because it's intelligence data. We don't have probable cause to arrest these guys, but we know that they've been released from jail and that they've committed other crimes there. So our officers are watching for them to see if they see them moving about in this neighborhood. And then this is just another piece of the analysis that we know that the burglaries that are happening in Beat 4 are happening during these hours of the day. Looks like the largest bulk of them are happening between 11 a and 1 p. The car clouts happen between midnight and 7 a.m. Roughly, and then during these days of the week. This is what our watch commanders use to concentrate officers in the right place at the right time. And Beat 5, which is the Bethel-Danabo, we're seeing an increase in auto theft, and we know that this guy operates or works and lives here. I don't know that he actually has a job. And this guy is on Fergus, which is also in this neighborhood here. And then more analysis of that. Go ahead. Thank you. Beat 6, this is the River Road, Santa Clara area. It looks like there isn't much crime here, but it's deceiving because these are just the Eugene Police Department statistics. And the good news is that it looks like crime is coming down over the last few years. Total numbers we're looking good. This is mostly due to the increase here is mostly due to theft from vehicles. So I'm not dissatisfied with where we are, but I'd like to bring, the most important thing is that we bring this stolen property rate down.
That's a one stolen vehicle, 100,000?
Have to go back.
At the bottom, one stolen vehicle represents 100,000?
Oh yeah, it could be.
Oh, but I mean, your total's only 426,000. That seems.
Yeah, Chair.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That means it'd be 326,000 for all these other offenses. That's not surprising.
Oh, not one stolen vehicle is 100,000, the second stolen vehicle is 200,000.
No, there was one vehicle in there that was worth $100,000.
Oh, okay, I got
Sorry.
it, okay. Thanks.
Uh,
I was like,
the other
I was thinking
thing,
each one.
I'm using a lot of time, so I'm going to race through this.
Okay.
The other important thing is that the captain and the 2 lieutenants that are responsible for policing on the west side of town, for instance, they develop a strategy for what needs to be, what policing has to be done in the coming week in order to reduce crime. That strategy is communicated to the sergeants and officers. We have teams that work east side, teams that work west side, through the daily watch plan. And we haven't perfected this yet. We're not 100% at composing these for every shift, but we will be. And every sergeant should walk into briefing and tell the officers, this is our mission today. When you're not going to a call for service, you need to be in this area investigating these crimes, doing this kind of proactive work. It's the most intentional our department's ever been before, but we got to get better than we are right now. Okay? And then we're working, as I said earlier, we're working on Scobert, and these are the problems, and this is how we're combating it. This is our effort at returning to problem-oriented community policing, but instead of, we don't have the capacity to have police officers do this, which is the desired model. Instead, our captain and lieutenants are putting together these kinds of strategies for correcting problems. It's a good step in the right direction, I think. And then I think we'll go ahead and go on from here. And then, of course, we have a detective assigned to monitor street gangs. It's a big job. It's more than one person should be doing. But a big part of that is sort of tracking gang activity through graffiti. And there's a whole language that we're looking at here that I'm not going to try and explain to you today. And then the control charts, Mayor, this is what you're asking about. This is just assaults, aggravated assaults. They go up and down, but we're seeing a slight increase if you look at how the average has been for the last 12 months or so in aggravated assaults and also on simple assaults. I think, although I've asked the Violent Crimes Unit to do an analysis of this so that we know exactly what the problem is, but I think most of these are probably related to bars, the downtown bars. Some of it's the street gang problem, but I think most of it is drunkenness, and we got to figure out how to work better with bars to manage that behavior. And then the burglary, you see that when the jail beds in 2008, they closed 84 jail beds, which is what happened just a month ago. Crime went up, and it started to come down again when the jail beds came back. I predict that we're going to see this same pattern, and the activity we've seen over the last couple of weeks suggests that might already have started. Vehicle theft, I mentioned earlier that it's been tracking down. It looks like our 5-year average is 134 a month, and now we're down in the, I think it's in the 30s. It looks like 31.8. That's what we've had recently, so that's good. And then this is our average stolen property. It's the 5-year average is a little over $1 million. This chart just goes through July, and that's a good trend. But again, you saw what the number was. It was 400 and some thousand bucks in the last month, so that might start going up a little. And then I wanted to make sure you know that the work that you've done on how to transition from the Monroe Street Public Safety Station. These are the recommendations that you made. That work is occurring. Right now the team that spends most of their time in there is pretty busy with the prevention convention, but they know they got a target date to have these in place by the time, or some variation on these by the time we're ready to move out next year. Yeah. The mayor will be there. The mayor from Springfield will be at a 9/11 memorial service, at a brief one on Sunday at 9 a.m. Prevention convention I mentioned. We have a promotion ceremony on September 27th. You're all welcome to go to that. And then follow-up meeting with the Asian community in Eugene about the taser incident that Tim pointed out earlier, that adjudication. And that's it. That went a little longer than I wanted it to. If you like, where our chair went, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Chief, for the report, and I'm actually pleased that we finally were able to give you the time that was kind of over, that we keep on cutting the time a lot of times, so it's okay. Anyone want to ask James?
First off, Chief, thank you very much for that very informative, up-to-date presentation. You always do a great job, and unfortunately, it's just like a highlight of each one of our commission meetings and stuff to see your report. I do have one question. I noticed that you've been doing a lot of interviews and stuff on television, and one of the interviews, something came out about establishing a small substation in the downtown area. I do recall as the Outreach and Resource Committee, just so that when we go back and do our follow-up with all of the neighborhood associations and stuff, so that we can kind of be sure of exactly what that station is, because we were consistent that we were not going to have, as Monroe Street is a brick and mortar type of facility. So when we're going back and reporting our findings, and by the way, thank you very much for reviewing all of our recommendations. That means a lot. I think that the committee did a lot of work. They spent a lot of hours and stuff and touched a lot of folks and stuff, and hopefully the feedback we brought back has some substance that you can use, and we're going to convey that back to everyone that we touch. But what type of structure, is it going to be a structure, or is it going to be maintained down here? I know that the concept at Monroe Street Station will no longer apply. So what type of format are we talking about, or model are we talking about?
There is at least one option, serious option that we're looking at, but we're negotiating that right now, so I'd rather not go into where it might be, but I can tell you that the downtown team will be fully staffed by next July, and that will be a total of 9 officers, a sergeant, and a community service officer. When we decided to move to 300 Country Club, our commitment to the community is that we would maintain a presence downtown. So that decision was made before our decision to move out of the Monroe Street Station. So they will have office space there, and depending on where they're located, they may actually share that space with another security workforce.
Okay. Out of that, is there an opportunity, or maybe even looked at as far as some of the prevention resource personnel occupying space there, or is the plan, or is it still on the drawing board right now?
The crime prevention team will be at 300 Country Club. We're consolidating as much as we can there in order to not lease space out.
Okay, so we're talking strictly law enforcement team that's going to be there in place.
Yeah, that's correct, along with the community service officer and potentially another security workforce.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have next Jim, and I'm next on the queue.
Couple questions. You mentioned Whitebird and issues going on down there. I know you talked about the attempted stabbing that they decided not to press charges, but it sounded like there were more issues going on around there the way you were talking. What are some of those that are?
Well, there's not a good way to track that. Well, I think there actually are good ways to track this, but they would be expensive and difficult and time-consuming. But presently, there isn't a good way to know how many homeless people we have in Eugene at any given time. The annual count is done in the winter when it's been distilled down to the smallest number in the year. I have personally seen more homeless people on the street this summer than I've ever noticed before. Doesn't mean there are more, that's my observation. And then also this summer we saw this migration of people that are sort of labeled as travelers, who are young homeless people in their late teens, early 20s, who sort of moved into Eugene, probably 300 to 500 of them, and then have migrated out. I don't know if 100% of them left. So that combination of things has placed heavy demand on homeless services in Eugene. One of those is Whitebird. And the neighborhood the neighborhood has changed. In the last 40 years since Whitebird was established there, the neighborhood has changed. The clientele that they serve has changed. And now there are property owners that rent space to a growing student population who worry about who's going to want to rent from them and worry about the people who live in those places, with the Whitebird Clinic right across the street. The problem that the Whitebird Clinic presents is that homeless people who are chronically inebriated or addicted to drugs show up there for treatment but don't go very far. They'll sleep in the curbs and on the sidewalk and in neighboring property and in alleys, and they'll get in fights like the one I mentioned today. And Whitebird can manage behavior on their property, but not very well off the property. So that's what it is. We have this evolution that's occurred over the last 5 years where we have unpredictable population that has dangerous tendencies that's now side by side with student housing, really, and businesses that are trying to succeed in a difficult economy. Pretty lengthy response to your
No, that's good information. The other question I had was, you were talking about the dispatch shortages. I can assume the reasons why, because it kind of sounds like that's a potential continual problem. It sounds like a lot of the jurisdictions have the same problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming a lot of that has to do with stress. Is that of the job, or is it, what reasons does it seem like everybody is kind of short in those fields?
Not everyone. We don't retain everyone we hire during their probationary period because it is very difficult work. It is stressful work, so not everyone makes the probationary period, and that's affected our numbers. People in the some of the reductions we've seen are due to people whose spouses have found work someplace else, and we've had some retirements, promotions, that kind of thing. The reason that in a workforce that's only 45, any slight variation has a dramatic effect because there isn't anybody else to do the work. There's only a finite number of people who can do this work. It's highly skilled, requiring a great deal of training. In the police, in the sworn side of the business, there's 185 people. If we ran out of people, even I could go out and work a shift, but only very few people can do this work in the 911 center, so that's the problem.
Thank you.
I am next, and the last person will be James. The Police Commission will be receiving further information about gangs. That is part of our work plan. And I just want to say that I got an invitation and accepted an invitation from the chief to participate in the conversation regarding gangs that may not have membership with the Latino community. I was there representing as the board president of Centro Latinoamericano only, and we were able to have a pretty decent starting, in my mind, dialogue about being careful how the information is presented to the community. There is concerns from the Latino community and the African American community, as I understand, of being profiled. I think it's going to take both mutual education and understanding of resources. And I hope that was not the only time that we get a chance to do that. I know that you're planning to do the summit and everything. I believe that keeping the conversation alive will be very important. I believe that having the right people there and expanding the circle, your circle, will be important. I'm only mentioning this because the Police Commission will see this again. And in some ways, I'm pretty good about keeping my hats separate. But in this case, I wanted to share that with you. That I appreciate the invitation, but let's keep it going. James, you're next, the last one.
Two things, I'll make it real short. First off, Chief Kearns, I want to commend you for being the example of leadership. I observed Chief Kearns out directing traffic one day. I thought he did one heck of a job too. So that was really refreshing to see. The leadership really getting down and getting dirty. He said that, hey, I haven't forgotten my skills either. So I really commend you for that. You did an exceptional job. I didn't honk at you, but I kind of waved at you a little bit. The second part
You
is...
mean wave to get out of the way?
He was good. The police commission role as to the prevention convention. Last year, my participation was as a volunteer. I went in there and I just did some volunteer. I manned at the station, handed out some brochures and things like that. But I didn't notice that the actual police commission itself had. I seen Jim and I spoke with Jim there and a few others. So I'm not sure if the police commission had a specific location or responsibility, or is that something that we want to do, or?
I polled the commission, and the general consensus was that, yes, you wanted a booth. So you have a table, and we've got people who volunteered for both a morning or earlier shift and a later shift, and I will work on what it is you do there. But I think it involves educating the community about what the commission does, the issues that are before the commission, and soliciting input and feedback back from the community about what they care about.
Okay.
So some way to do all of that.
Okay, so that would actually, in addition, that would fall up under the Outreach and Resource Committee in the future as we go down as to the design and the conduct later on. The next thing, do we get T-shirts?
If you want to buy a shirt, you just go right ahead.
All right, I want to buy a shirt. I want to represent.
So we have a booth at the prevention convention. Are there any commissioners that would like to staff that table?
I've gotten a list of, there's 5
Great.
people volunteered in the morning and 3 in the afternoon.
Excellent. So thank you for volunteering. And let me remind you that you are there as a police commissioner, and there is a lot of expectations of conduct, and I know you will know what that is. So I know you will represent as well. I might be there also to volunteer. With that, I'm going to send us to break. Let's do a 5-minute break, please. And thank you again, CRB members, for coming. We'll see you soon. I ask you to come back to the table now. Jesse? Jesse, are you ready? You ready? Okay. And Tim? Tim, are you ready?
Okay.
Go.
All right.
James?
You need a whistle.
That's what I wanted her to get. Short break.
Yeah, have a lot to do. Maybe somebody can grab James.
You call us all back together? Is that
Yep.
what you're doing here?
Very quietly.
We'll get you a gavel.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sing it. All right.
Maybe we jumped the gun on that appoint committee members. Oh, no, we still have the other, that's right. We still have the other committee.
Try and go. See if you can go on that for the thing. I mean, I'm gonna be there for maybe an hour or two anyway.
I really wish we could have our little 8-question survey sitting.
I was gonna mention yet to James, but we're just not ready.
A little too premature.
But you know, the other 7 questions we have ready, I would love to see them at least next year. Put it like in a brochure like this.
Uh-huh.
Put it like this. Maybe a page.
Still working on
like
your
that
patience.
Patience.
I can pass them out, but not this.
It was it's in the bylaws. It actually says that he has to do this and then present it to the whole. Yeah, I know.
All right, folks, let's resume our meeting. The next item on our agenda is appointments to the Policy Screening and Review Committee. The committee is recommending Bob Walker and Jesse Lorkey, and we're asking for your blessing in appointing the 2 commissioners. Tamara?
I move that we appoint Bob Walker and Jesse Lorkey to the Policy Screening and Review Committee.
Thank you. Discussions on the motion? Okay. All those in favor to appoint Jesse Lorkey and Bob Walker to the Policy Screening and Review Committee, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Commissioners. Welcome, Jesse. Welcome, Bob, officially to the committee. Looking forward to work with you. Okay. The next item on our agenda happens to do with our bylaws. We are making some proposals for changes. At our retreat, and I'm going to have Carter to walk us through the changes. But at a retreat, we began that conversation, and I hope you had a chance to look at the changes. Carter, you ready? Okay.
What you have in your packet is a clean version of the policy, the bylaws that were in place, that are in place as of today, with red lines indicating the substantive changes, and notes in the right column telling you why, and telling me so I can remember why. So I'm going to, unless somebody's working from the copy up there, I'm going to work from a paper copy. Is that okay? Okay. So the first page of the bylaws have no changes. The second page includes addition of language that talks about fair and impartial treatment of all employees, applicants, and contractors, volunteers, and agents of the city. I pulled that language from the Boards and Commissions Manual, and you'll see several references to the Board and Commission Manual. You got a copy of that in the May retreat, as well as it was in the new member orientation packet. And one of the changes that we included in here is making the bylaws and that Board and Commission Manual internally consistent. So there were places where our bylaws were not consistent, and there are places where ours were silent, where the board and commission manual was not. So some of these changes just incorporated into the commission's bylaws some of the regulations that the city manager's office is putting in place and sharing with everybody, saying this is how boards and commissions should go. Thought it made sense to include those here, so that when you see that it's being made consistent with the B&C manual, that's what that is, or current city policy, that's what that is as well. So it's an addition on that. Article 2, Section 4 is adding language that's in the board and commission manual. Next page.
Carter, can I clarify?
Yeah.
Is that going to be numbered number 5, so it's a separate goal and objective? Or purpose and objective?
Yes. I mean, it can, I hadn't worried about numbering yet, but.
Oh, well, no, but it's going to be considered a purpose and objective. It's not related to.
Correct.
We don't undertake review
Correct.
of allegations.
Yes, it's a
Okay.
numbered, it'll be number 5, that's
Okay.
correct, sorry.
That's good.
Next page, additions, adds language. Our current bylaws said that you had to be a city resident, and the board and commission manual says that you have to be a resident or a resident of the urban growth boundary, so we're making this consistent with that.
Such an odd way of saying it. You're not residents of the urban growth boundary, you're residents within the urban growth boundary.
We can change it to say within.
Are you making a motion to change it? You're making a suggestion?
Just what a comment.
Okay.
And when we say that's consistent with the boards and commissions manual, is that a manual that's been authorized by city council, so that city council also is in agreement that it's somebody within the urban growth boundary?
That is what the city manager's office trains to for all boards and commission staff and all boards and commission members. So I'm assuming that it is.
That city code allows not just city residents to be on boards and commissions, but people within the urban growth boundary.
Okay, next.
Included language about representation being in proportion to the population. Again, that's also in the board and commission manual. That's lifted directly. And that's in numbered paragraph 3. Sub B added or other higher education institutions to make the higher ed target populations greater than just LCC and University of Oregon. New numbered paragraph will be that members of EWEB can't be on the police commission. That is also from the boards and commissions manual.
Question. You say members of EWEB.
The board. So it's Eugene City employees aren't allowed to be on the commission. EWEB is actually a subsidiary or a function of the city of Eugene, and because of that, they also are not allowed to be on the police commission.
Found that out myself.
Just the EWEB board members, not EWEB employees.
Correct.
Excuse me.
Yes. No, I think it's employees.
Employees also.
Yeah,
But
I think
no,
it's employees.
there's also employees.
Because they're functionally employees of the city.
City employees may not serve at EWEB and vice versa.
Okay.
That includes, does that include board members? I didn't think board members.
It just says employees of the city of
Okay,
Eugene
well, to make
or
sure that
EWEB
that's-
may not serve on the.
Kitty?
That's all, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay. So, we're good?
I'm good.
Bernadette?
That's good. Just to be clear, it does not include board members because they're not employees of EWEB, they're just serving on the board.
But this,
Excuse me, board members can serve here.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
I think the confusion is the name of EWEB.
Has board in it.
Has board in it, that's why there's a confusion.
So it's employees of the city or EWEB can't be on this commission.
so if someone is a sitting board member for EWEB, they can still be on this board.
Correct.
For the add clarification, I know it's going to be redundant, but if it says employees of the city of Eugene or employees of EWEB, would that add clarification or that would be too much?
I was going to suggest you just use the acronym, and there won't be any confusion.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. 1 second.
Okay, sorry.
Just- And I'm probably just not understanding the whole ramification there. Are counselors considered employees of the city? They're not. Okay, that's what I want to make sure. Okay, thank you. That was it.
I wish.
He's going six,
Okay, that's
numbered paragraph 6, sub
Yeah, that's
B. The Boards and Commission Manual says that excused absences don't matter when you're looking at absences. So we are striking because it says no distinction is to be made between excused or unexcused absences. Removal of a member by the city council for being absent for more than 3 consecutively scheduled meetings, period, because there is no, in their Boards and Commission Manual, we're not supposed to make a distinction between excused or not excused.
I got a question.
That's what it is. Tim?
2 things. I'm assuming that being at the meeting on the phone means you're at the meeting and you're not absent from the meeting. And the other thing is, does this require then the city council to remove a member if they are absent for more than 3 consecutively scheduled meetings? Or do they just do that or don't do that based on their whims?
The removal will be the city council representative. So, is that my,
Council gets to remove someone if they miss more than 3 absences.
Consecutive.
Consecutive absences.
And it's a shall, not a can.
Right.
I mean, they have to.
Usually at the request of the Board of Commission, is that right?
right, we will request that. That's what I was kind of, okay. So we will request that he be removed, but
So the chair of this body would ask the city council to vote to remove the person.
right. But they'll have the final authority, as you.
Thank you.
Carter?
And I'm going to just keep blowing through. You're going to ask questions if you got them, if you come. No changes in Articles 4 or 5. Continuing on to the next page, numbered paragraph 4. That would be Article 5, numbered paragraph 4. Striking the sentence that says by the minutes recorder, we are required to keep a record of this meeting. As we are being required to videotape them, the commission can have a discussion about whether you want to pay for videotaping meetings and pay for a minutes recorder. If it says it in here that it's going to be done by a minutes recorder, that decision gets made for you. So by striking it, all I'm doing is proposing that you then, we have to record the meeting. How you do it is the call of the commission as well as resources available. So that's why that is being struck.
May I interrupt you here for a second? The leadership of the commission looked at all these changes beforehand.
Yeah.
As you see, she's going through all the changes that leadership is proposing.
Right.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Article 6, Section 1. This was actually a recommendation from the city manager's office. The current bylaws say we have to get a plan to them by July 1, and oddly enough, we've not done that for several years. So we're saying as close to July 1 as possible, so we have a chance of not being always out of compliance with that section. And striking that it needs to, council's approval of any amendment has to be done on consent item. They get to decide how that gets approved. It could be on consent, it could be on whatever mechanism they want, so just not being as prescriptive of how. Numbered paragraph 2, the way that the public meetings notice calendar goes out is the notice goes out. I get the notice to the city manager's office on, this is more accurate. If I say at least a week prior, that is what it needs to, the week prior is what it needs to say. Down to Article 7, numbered paragraph 4. This is getting in line with the perception of fairness policy. Before it gave the commission the option to decide whether someone could abstain if there was a perceived conflict of interest. And what this change says is if you think you've got a conflict of interest, abstain. It's always going to be safer to avoid a real or perceived conflict of interest, rather than having the commission vote on whether they think your perception is accurate or not. Because if their perception is that you don't have a conflict, but in fact someone in the community does, it doesn't matter what the commission thought. So we want to err on the conservative side and creating distance between perception of fairness and abstentions.
Okay.
So this section is kind of confusing to me, so how would I be able to tell whether I had a perceived conflict of interest?
If you think you do, you perceive that you do.
Oh, well, for example, I worked on the developmental disability or the Universal Access Committee, and I'm on the board of a nonprofit that works with people with developmental disabilities. Does that mean that I've got a conflict of interest? I'd need some training to be able to tell, I think.
The closing of the paragraph says that if you're in doubt, you can ask the advice of the city attorney, and I would be happy to funnel those requests through.
Kitty?
I was going to say is the way we usually handle it is if you really think that there's a chance that it's an actual conflict of interest, you can check with Glenn or whoever to validate that, as she just said. If you just think there might be a perception out there, all you have to do is state out loud that, you know, you're not going to be affected by this, but you belong to X, Y, and Z, and so you've made that public, and you've made it clear that it's not going to affect your judgment on what you're doing, and then you've done your due diligence.
Thank you for adding that.
Number paragraph 5 at the top of the next page clarifies that all members of the commission shall be involved in the commission and may be involved in committees. It apparently read as if every member of the commission had to be a committee member, and we don't have enough committee member spots, so this just clarifies that it's a permissive to be involved in committees.
Tamara?
So in, which section was this, 6B? Sorry, the one about excused absences. On, what pages I remember, sorry, Article 3, 6B, we took out the without having been excused by the chair of the commission, but this section sort of repeats that. It says 3 consecutive regular commission meetings with or without a quorum and without having been given a leave of absence by the commission chair. So if we're striking it in one place, we probably should be taking out and without having been given a leave of absence by the commission chair.
So I think the intent here is, the Boards and Commission Manual includes both provisions, and I think the intent is to say, if you know you're going to be gone for 4 months, you can seek a leave of absence for a finite time of absence, and that's different than every month I'm going to be absent. Okay. So this allows for, I'm going to be out on maternity leave.
Okay, thanks for the distinction, because it seemed like...
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
Numbered paragraph 6 is a correction of something that we didn't know we were not doing correctly, but we weren't. The bylaws read that an agenda committee was established with the chair, vice chair, and staff. With public records law, public meetings law, that becomes a public meeting that needs to be noticed, and agendas need to be made, and minutes need to be taken. The intent was never to have the agenda setting process be a public meeting for which minutes need to be taken and a public record needs to be retained. So this changes it from an unintentional public meeting to the chair sets the agenda after consulting the vice chair and staff, and that the vice chair has the opportunity, if there is disagreement, of proposing an alternate agenda. Because what is at issue is public deliberation between public officials needs to be public. Decisions by individuals on public bodies does not. So chair is allowed to make the agenda and propose the agenda. The chair is not allowed to have a meeting with other members of the committee to talk about the agenda and have that not be a public meeting. And that is similar to how the council handles it, where the mayor sets the agenda and she can consult whoever she wants. That is not the issue. The issue is it is her agenda to set.
I don't want to be picky about this, but if you're really worried about, the fact that this is the public meetings law, then you really haven't undone anything, because you're permitting the chair to meet with the vice chair to establish the agenda. Consult the vice chair. Consulting means talking together. Where two people meet, that's a meeting under the public meetings law. So you're still doing the same thing regardless. I mean, I don't think.
According to the city attorney, the issue isn't that two people get together. The issue is where is the decision-making authority? If it rests with a body of more than one person, that's when it becomes a meeting. So you are allowed to go and talk to Jim about work of the commission until the commission says, Jim and Bob, you are now commissioned to be a committee, go off and do something. When you become the official body to do that, that becomes a public meeting. So he is permitted to make the decision, the agenda on his own, independent of any input from anybody, and he would like consult these other folks.
Okay.
But then it's your call.
That gets around it, that's fine. No problem.
It does.
If you disagree, I'll just give you a different agenda. For your consideration.
Next.
Section 7 change was proposed by the city manager's office because we had outdated processes for how an emergency meeting is set. Actually, they're the ones who notify the media. So that just makes it the way that it's supposed to be. Moving on to the next page, Article 8, Section 4, makes this in line with the boards and commissions manual, and which also reflects the state public records law about what is required for a meeting. So.
1 second. Tim?
So I have a question here. In the paragraph 3 there, it says, city staff members shall mail or electronically provide minutes of the previous meeting. And in number 4 in the new language, it says a record must be kept of all public meetings, which may be written minutes or sound, video, or digital recordings. So if all we do is keep a record via a digital recording, then we might not have any minutes. And number 3 says minutes needed to be mailed. So there seems to be a conflict there.
That's correct. If this commission wants to, this commission has the, okay. The city attorney has determined that a video recording is sufficient for public records, for the record of the public meeting. They're also advising that we keep a written record, because they're easier to distribute and easier to refer to, but not required. If this commission wants to require that we continue to keep written minutes, they may or may not need to be paid 10-page minutes. They could be 3 pages with the bare minimum of what's required here in A through E. But you're right, Section 3 binds the commission to continue to provide written minutes when we're not required to. So if you want to.
Okay, great, that's thank you, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Moving on to the next change is numbered paragraph 13 in Article 9. This is language from the Boards and Commissions Manual that says only commission members are eligible to become members of the committee, and that the committee may seek input and advice from the community regardless of committee membership. That is consistent with what the Boards and Commissions Manual says. And that is it.
Thank you, Carter, for walking us through the changes. Any questions? Caitlin?
To approve the changes to the bylaws.
Second.
Discussion on the motion?
Second.
Oh, Tamara seconded it. Thanks. It's already seconded. Now it's just discussion.
I'm sorry. I thought you were calling.
Anyone has any questions or discussions on this? No? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor to adopt the changes on our bylaws, say aye. 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 Those opposed, say same sign. Thank you.
you.
That passes unanimous. And I want to say thank you again, Clara, for helping us put all this together, and Tamara for your great input for the bylaws. Thank you. All right, next item is our committee recommendations on the search and seizure policy. As you know, that committee's been working on this latest policy for a few weeks. With the changes, we're going to have Vice Chair of that committee, Tamara, to walk us through the changes only. I hope you had a chance to look at and read the policy itself. She's going to walk us through the changes, and I'll open up for questions. Tamara?
I have an extra clean copy if somebody doesn't have a copy and wants to follow along. So I don't have the red line.
Do you mind if Lieutenant Fellman joins us?
Oh, I don't mind at all, please. And Police Auditor, would you like to join us at the table?
Ow, my.
So you're going through the red line copy?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, starting with section, there was I'm skipping over some minor things that are like renumbering of paragraphs to make them follow consecutively. The title of section 322.2 is changed to read reasonable expectation of privacy. The word privacy was added. In that same paragraph 322.2, the fourth line down, the third line down, after should not physically enter any area, the committee added or search any property or possessions. And then it continues on where an individual has reasonable expectation of privacy. That was in response to the ACLU's concerns about personal property searches such as backpacks. That's why that change was made. In that same section, in the bulleted area, before the word consent, the word valid was added. In section 322.3, under specific situations, and the opening paragraph at the end of the first line, you had members of this department will conduct property searches in a manner that returns the condition of the property to its pre-search status nearly as reasonably practicable. On the next page, page 2, on 322.3.2 plain view in section A3, the word access was added at the end to be consistent with legal standard. Section 322.3.4 person searches in item A, at the very last word, courtesy was added. Actually, it was, yeah, that's right. Was added as a best practice before it just read with dignity. On the next page, page 3, there was some light conversation about some places in the policy. It said automobile, some places said vehicle. What's commonly known as an automobile exception is a judicially recognized standard, but to be consistent through the policy, because not all vehicles are automobiles, we chose to change the title to say vehicle exception instead of automobile exception. We're going to hold all the questions till the end when we get through them.
Yeah, please hold the questions until we're done with the sections.
So I can't, let's see. So there's a lot of, if you have the version with the notes, there's a lot of explanation about why section 322.3.6, vehicle exception, was changed, but essentially this is a constitutional and judicial standard that's based in constitutional law and recognized by the courts, formed in the courts. So we changed quite a bit or moved things around in that paragraph. So if you have the red line version, that's why the whole thing is basically highlighted, and you can read out the notes on the side. Under consent 322.4, Again, in the first paragraph there, the first sentence there, entry into a location for the purpose of conducting a search or searching personal property belongings is what was added there. That, again, was in response to the points raised by the ACLU. Further down, in this paragraph, there was a lot of discussion about consent, consent to a search. And so there was some language added in this section that now makes it read at the end of the second paragraph. We added the sentence, the consent to search form provides strong support for the validity of consent. And right under that, if unusual circumstances prevent the use of the consent to search form, officer should describe such circumstances in related reports. And then starting on page 4, the second paragraph down, everything from the second paragraph down on page 4 in that section was added into this policy. So I'm not going to go through and read all of that. Hopefully you've had a chance to read that. That was added by the committee. And then section 322.5 is, if you caught that in the CRB report, there was the community caretaking under Oregon law that we didn't have in a policy, and so this section was added. It's modeled after the Portland policy. So that whole section doesn't show it in the red line version, but that whole section's new to the department's policy.
Mm-hmm.
322.6, obtaining a warrant and search warrants. There were some minor housekeeping changes to that section. Page 6, section 322.6.23. This section 3 was added. That whole section 3 is 3 is new. We have a gap in the numbering on this section, Carter.
Mm-hmm.
It was go from 3 to 5 here, so I think that's an error in the numbering there, so it should be 3 and 4. But 4 is also new, or what's listed as 5, section 5 in your copy. Is it consecutive in the clean copy? I'm not looking at that one. It says it goes from 3 to 5. And then also 3, which is what's labeled 5, but is actually 4. B. I'm sorry. So it's A. Sorry, I have to go back to the previous page. Section B on that same page, page 6, is also new language to the policy, clarifying the role of the supervisor in the department. And there were also some significant changes to C, coordinating officer, again, in sections 1 through 5 under C, to clarify the role and the duties of that person, the person filling that position. This is a long policy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
On page 8, which is section, might be a different page, isn't a clean copy, but labeled as section 11. We added the words to the court in section 11 because it wasn't clear of at least clear to the people reading the policy, who the search warrant needed to be returned to, so we added the words to the court within 5 days after service. Section 322.6.3 was previously titled Seizure of Blood Samples. It's been retitled Seizure of Body Fluids. And language to address body fluids other than blood was added in that section. Section 3 listed a bit more detail under that section. It would be A3 about how the blood draw procedure works. And then under section D, again, there's quite a lot of language. Section D, the language is all new, as well as section E. And there are some other housekeeping changes to 322.6.4 telephonic search warrants, Eugene Municipal Court. Those are mostly housekeeping changes. And then paragraph 322.6.5 electronic enhancement is a paragraph that was added by the committee. Language added by the committee. So, sorry to walk you through that fast. I know there's probably lots of questions, so I'll turn the time back over to Juan Carlos to answer any questions.
You probably noticed, thank you, Tamara, for walking us through all of that. This is, again, the work of that committee who's been working on this for a few weeks. You probably noticed the other table is now the police auditor and Lieutenant Hellman. And if we get to the point, I will ask, as a point of expertise, the ACLU representative, if he chooses to, if we get to the point and she wishes to, I'll be calling on her. Okay. Let's just go over section by section, see if you have any questions. 1 second, Bob. So what I intend to do with this policy, I'm going to go over each section to see if you have any questions, or are there any motions or anything like that. Bob, do you want to say anything?
No? Get to this section, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. So, there we go. 322.1 purpose and scope. .2 reasonable expectation of privacy. 2.3 specific situations.
If I may, I'm not seeing anything in here right now. I sort of like in the preamble and what we've done in the past in terms of preambles is somewhere in here that discusses an issue that you talked about earlier, which was the racial profiling issue. And that probably is more attributable to vehicle stops. In other words, some sort of articulable circumstances with which to make the vehicle stops beyond race, something along those lines. I'm trying to conceptualize what I got in terms of how the information I got. Some of these, this is far more vast than I had originally got, so I must have screwed up someplace. The other issue, I guess, for me is trying to figure out where the injection process is for the auditor's office. I know that during the TASER process, it was less than a linear process, and so I never found a comfort zone about where my injection should be on that. I have staff members randomly injecting themselves in the process, and so for something as important as this and for other policies in the future, I think I have a pretty good comfort zone with the police department, but I'm not sure I found it yet for the police commission about where we inject and how we might be able to contribute, because this is, I think, one of the certainly most top 5 important policies in the entire police procedure manual, and I know that they train very well, but I also want to make sure that the officers have a great resource tool to use and that they can look to when they have questions in their own minds about things. So my bigger issue is the injection process, but early on in your process, then articulable circumstances that justify a search versus just, again, some sort of profiling things. And I think I might have sent that some language to Carter about that. If not, then I do have some language about that. But I think that that needs to be clearly spelled out in the policy about having articulable circumstances and not based on some sort of demographic characteristic.
All right, Tamara?
Just my 2 cents about, in response to your question about the point where the auditor comments, hopefully you feel comfortable commenting at any point in time, you're always welcome at our committee meetings or at our full commission meeting to comment on policy. So I think any place that you feel is appropriate to comment, you certainly welcome your comments, or I do, at the committee level, at the commission level here, or obviously you can always make your comments to the chief when he's considering the policy. But I think at any point, and hopefully you're being apprised and kept abreast of what we're working on. Were you aware we were working on this policy?
I was aware of it. I honestly didn't pay a lot of. I didn't grasp how far along you were in the process per se, and so I need to do a better job doing that as well. But and if that's fine with all of you, is like, let me think that what I think is the best spot to come in on doing this, then I'd be more than happy to do that. Because again, I didn't think that. I thought that our input in the taser policy was disjointed, and of course that was really my first experience with a big policy issue for the police commission, so it was a learning experience for me as well, and I just don't want to have to go through that whole thing again. So if that works for you, then that'll work for me.
Allow me to add a little more on that. I'm glad that you're bringing that up. That is, in fact, some of the theme of tonight, so when it's appropriate. I don't know whether your office will want to see more outreach formal. Police auditor, do you have anything to say other than just sending an email and here's what we're working on? I appreciate you saying that. We need to do better. We can do better, and we'll find ways to do so. I'm hoping that policies like this will, in fact, rise to a level where you will come and not just you, but I want to see a balance. These police auditor, maybe the ACLU and other groups like that. So I don't have an answer for you either, but I also hope that anytime, just like anybody in the public, that we will be able to do that. In regards to the purpose and scoping, I don't know if that's the best place to put it, but I'm glad the chief is here to listen to that kind of feedback. The committee didn't actually look at it that way, but I appreciate that feedback. I would suggest the chief would take a note of that and see if that's something that either the commission or the chief might consider taking those comments, especially on articulate circumstances that may or may not involve race or is other than race. So I appreciate that. Kitty?
So I don't know exactly what the urgency of our timeline is, so we're probably learning how to do this better, right? And so this seems like such an important issue that to, in this particular thing, to pause and to get that input seems an important thing to do. If we have the time to do that, that seems important. And in the future, I think it would be good for us to, your committee, to any committee, to think about when they think is the most appropriate time to take that input as well as others and sort of systematically invite it in at what you think would be the time that would be most helpful to the committee that's working on the particular policy. And then in that way, it seems to me that you would already have integrated what you've heard from the ACLU, what you've heard from the auditor, and what you've heard from whoever else needs to be in the conversation. By the time it comes here, you've kind of integrated most of that that conversation, and then they're here to add a little bit more if it's necessary at this juncture. So I guess I'm saying I think that's good. I think maybe this time we didn't do it. We didn't get it, either because you didn't get it in, you didn't participate as much as maybe you needed to, and maybe you didn't get them in, and it doesn't matter. It's just we learned from this experience. If we have time, I think we should take the time to fully integrate that into your thinking and as well as this whole group.
I will entertain a motion to do so. I want to remind the commission that we will continue to invite everyone who wants to participate and give us feedback. These policies do go out as soon as we get them for feedback, including the police commission. I want to make sure that we're careful to include everyone unless there is specific expertise, which is also in our bylaws. That may be to the preference of the chair. So thanks for your comments. I see a few hands up. I don't know which one. I think it was you first, and Jesse, and then Bob.
I agree. Each time we've had a policy brought before the commission, I've emailed the police auditor's office to find out if they have comments as to how this would impact. And so I kind of felt like I was in this position of being the liaison for the CRB, but also trying to kind of somehow be a liaison to make sure that the police auditor's comments were being made. And I don't know that that's really what my position should be, that the police auditor may have a different take or position than the CRB would have. And so I kind of felt like I was straddling two roles sometimes. And so I appreciate that Mark was asked to be at the table today, but the fact that he didn't know he was going to be at the table, I'm not sure that he's fully prepared to really make comments on all the different changes that this is going to have. So I would at this time, and given the late hour and the heat, move to postpone the acceptance of the search and seizure policy to the meeting scheduled for October.
I second that. And can I modify the motion?
It depends on what it is. Yeah, I just need to know what's the modification.
And I'd offer a friendly amendment to ask the PSRC to look at it at their next meeting.
That would be the motion that I would make, that we send all this feedback and the policy back to the committee, and that would take precedence.
After it's seconded, you have to vote, and then he can amend, and I'm not sure that's friendly, but.
I'm confused, Mr. Chairman, point of order. Are we laying this on the table, or what are we doing? Are we voting to lay on the table? We are, then it's not a discussion, it's just a note. Are we laying it on the table?
So at this point, there's a motion to postpone this whole thing until the next.
And I second that.
That's been seconded. And then there was an amendment, but it wasn't really an amendment. It was really a different motion. And, okay, well, then no, I wouldn't. I'm not prepared to do that at this time, because I'm not sure that that's what makes the most sense. Because if the PSR, whatever, if the committee has already agreed to putting this to us, I'm not sure sending it back makes sense. So.
Do you have anything? We're going to discuss about the motion then. Okay. Bob?
Chairman, and again, it's on our agenda. We either need to take it up or we need to table it. So I'll offer a substitute motion to table.
Okay,
if we're going to table something, we need to set a date.
We have to vote on the motion that's on the table first.
You can substitute.
Discussion about the motion, right?
No, we're still on the discussion about the motion. Anyone wants to get on?
But isn't mine a table?
That's why I asked you if it was. You were making other amendments to it.
No, somebody offered an amendment. Okay. So if I move to table it, you can't amend it. Okay. So in other words, I didn't articulate it as a table as opposed to a motion to postpone. Okay. Sorry, I used the wrong word. Table it till the next meeting.
For next meeting.
You want to amend your motion?
No, it's a table. It's not a motion.
That is your motion.
Right. Yeah, my motion is to table to the next meeting.
There's no discussion.
No discussion.
At the next.
That's Robert's Rules of Order.
At the next.
To the next police commission meeting. If the committee does something in between, I have nothing over that. They can choose to do whatever they want between now and then. I'm not talking about it though, because I'm not supposed to. Robert's Rules of Order.
That's right.
I've just tabled
that discussion.
Okay, so we're going to table the policy for the next meeting. My problem is, so what do we do with the information that we're trying?
No discussion. No discussion. You vote.
Thank you for setting me straight. Okay, so it's table for.
No. Just vote on the table. Does everybody want to table this until the next meeting?
Thank you very much. All those in favor to table the motion, table the policy until next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye. No.
No.
Thank you. I'm voting no.
Again, I apologize. I admire the work of the committee, the swiftness and the detail that you've done on this work. I feel personally responsible for kind of delaying this, but it's an issue that I'm very passionate about, and it's the second time have had input on a major policy issue, and the first time y'all were far more deliberate, and this time I think that it went very, very smoothly, which kind of quite honestly caught me by surprise, and so my apologies for not being as prepared as we should have been.
All right. James?
Just so that the record is straight, then I too voted nay as to the table, and I'll tell you why. I think that the work had been out there for some time, and if the work continues, it can be out for months and months and so on. So that's my reason why I voted nay. But the yeas win, so.
So yeah.
I just want to say, I think the work is really good. And my only intention here is to be sure we take in everything we need to take in before we make the final decision. So it may not change anything, or it may add something. So, but the auditor is an important piece of the whole picture. So.
Tamara?
I agree that a lot of work's been done, and and we want to have the goal is to have the best policies for the department that we can have. So I think that that's fine. There has been a lot of work done by the committee. It is a lengthy policy. It is an important policy. Part of the artificial pressure to move the policy forward is that there are several policies following behind this at the policy screening committee that the timelines have already sort of bypassed us. The department's already taken those policies that we were going to work on, including vehicle pursuits. I can't remember what there was two others following that we had been given deadlines of June to comment, August to comment, September to comment. Those dates have all passed by for those three upcoming policies. And so while we don't usually do our work at in line with somebody else's deadline, what we've been told is, well, the time for you to comment on those, we've already moved on with those. So I'm not defending that. I'm sort of explaining why there might have been some internal pressure felt on the policy screening committee to move a policy forward that we felt like we had done our group's work on. Nobody had additional comments. So that was on the committee at the time, so we moved the policy forward. So we can certainly take additional comment. We want to have additional comments made so that we know we've debated, but at some point you have to cut that debate off and the new comments off and move forward with the policy. So I look forward to seeing this in October.
Okay. Chief?
There is some consequence to delaying policies, and I've been on advisory boards. I do not want to tell the advisory board what to do with your work, because then I'm advising myself, and I know how dissatisfying that can be. But there are policies that need to be implemented soon, and if your work is delayed, then I have to just do the work and implement them, which means you'll do the work eventually, and the police department will do the work twice. It would be nice if we could have a predictable schedule that we could work from. And that'll happen with the pursuit policy, for instance.
Kitty?
So if this 1 month blocks up moving on anything at all, why don't we form the next committee that has to work on the next thing and see if you've got people that want to get started on it?
The appropriate thing will be to send it back to the policy screening review committee to consider the comments and feedback. I don't want to be the one making the motion if somebody wants to.
Well, I was going to just comment that I hoped that the policy screening committee would take this up again, and if we are concerned about being timely, that we could schedule a meeting like we just got done changing our schedule to be at the next month that we have our next meeting. So we could choose to have one in just a couple of weeks in order to speed things up if we felt that was important. I personally feel it's really important that that we get the auditor's input as well as some others that have come forward, and if they can provide that in 2 weeks or a week and a half or whatever. I'm not going to make a motion to that effect. I think that's kind of up to the chair, but if somebody thinks that's appropriate to make a motion, then go ahead and do so. But I hope we do discuss it at that committee.
And if I may add, I have a chance with the police department. I mean, I truly appreciate the need to implement this as soon as possible because the other one just didn't cut it, the old policy. And so I just wanted to let you know that I still have an opportunity before the chief makes his final decision to offer some input on this. I'm just trying to recollect when I reviewed this, the comments didn't come up, and it must have been the way the document opened. So this in some ways is kind of is different than what I had seen the first time, and again, not finding out just last week that this was kind of like your final decision sort of point. Then we sort of started scrambling for it, and so. But I mean, I'm going to have an opportunity to have input on this because I'm very passionate about this issue, and I know where there have been hiccups in other cities around the country on these policies, and where there have been problems as a result of that. So I don't have any doubt that at the end of the day, Chief Kearns is going to give me an opportunity to have the input that I think that I'll need. I don't want to disrupt the wheels turning with this commission in any way, shape, or form, and I don't need this forum per se to offer my input. So if you want that, then we're more than happy to do that, and I can assure you that within the next several days, Lee and I will have formulated what we think, if we think there's anything missing, that we'll have that together in the next several days. So whatever your choice is, I don't want to disrupt the work of this commission, most certainly more than anything, because it's very good from what I'm seeing.
Thank you. I have next Kitty, then Tamara, and then Kaylin. Okay. Tamara?
Mark, not every policy takes place commission 11 months. So sorry to surprise you.
I know. I learned a tough lesson today.
We've done some in 2 weeks.
I'd like to move that the commission send this search and seizure policy back to the policy screening and review committee for further revision and bring back by the October 5th. Is it October 5th? Full commission meeting. The next full commission meeting in October.
Somebody second? Discussion on the motion?
Do we have to do that? I'm just curious.
Well, it's been forwarded by the committee, so the committee finished its work on it. So for them to take it back up, yes, it has to.
Okay.
Yes.
Not a reference.
Discussion on the motion, Bob? Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to explain my position because I felt like what you were saying was getting to the point, but we were going to start discussing amendments and changing the motion and getting it into a discussion of why we should do all that, and I thought it would be simpler to do this. And my concern was twofold. We had two commission members who have concerns about the way the policy is written, and they should have their full opportunity. This is not the forum to do that because we're here to either approve it or not, and maybe make some tweaks, but not obviously deep concerns that upper commission members have, and now the auditor has. So we need to allow that input, get the process solidified, and get it voted on. And I can't think of any other better way to do that than to send it back to the committee, let them work on it and fix it. And as far as the chief's concerned, chief has the authority at any time to make an amended policy, an interim policy that amends an issue that he feels is a problem, and let that be working until we make a recommendation to him and he makes it permanent. And he can either accept or not accept the recommendation. But in the meantime, I hope it doesn't interfere with the operation of the department. We know how critical it is that officers know what they can and cannot do in their everyday work. So I hope that it doesn't interfere with his ability to do that. Thank you.
Kaylin, you were next on the queue. Do you want to comment on the motion or wait until we finish discussing? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to call both on the motion. Those in favor to sending the policy back to the PSRC, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. The motion passes. 2 opposed. All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay then.
Okay. This may not be the most favorable comment, but I would say that if the auditor just said that he has his own external ways of communicating with the chief, and then he can use that access. And if we have 2 members of the commission that have concerns, I would actually say right now is the place to voice them. We're just going to delay it for months for 2 people who are already here. I personally would like to hear it because I'm not on the committee. So I don't know. I just feel like delaying it a month for us all to talk again in a different location doesn't make much sense to me. I'm going to try this. I won't take offense if it fails utterly. I move to rescind the previous motion.
Discussion on the motion to rescind. Okay. I'm going to call for a vote on the motion. Those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
It's okay.
We're going to now move on to closing comments. And I want to start with you, James, and I work this way.
I think that President Bush, I was fortunate enough to be part of the security force when he was in Australia. And the parliamentary process that they use, they get up and they heckle and everything else. Of course, we don't do that here. But he did make a comment that I thought that was kind of right on time. He said, isn't free speech a good thing? And I do agree with that. Sometimes we just don't, we see things from a different vantage point, and respectfully, we respect those other views and stuff. So I have no problem with that. I do have a concern about once the committees are given tasks to perform, if there are no end dates or no target dates of closure attached to them, then that means that they will go on infinitely forever and ever and ever. I think that all good things must come to an end. I think that once closure is met, then we should stay firm. If we continue to go and revisit the work that we do, then I don't see very much advantage of doing that. Things can be added as amendments or presented at the time of discussion, and then we can move forward.
Thank you, James. Bob?
Yes, thank you. I have that concern as well that James has, is that we would never finish something if we continue to get more and more input. But I just felt that this time we had so many people that had concerns that it just seems to me a fairer process to let everybody vent, get what they have on their mind out, and then bring the final product with a lot less debate at a general meeting where you have so many other topics to deal with, to go ahead and handle it that way. And getting back to what the auditor said, I really think I understand what he's concerned about, but I'm concerned that we're mixing policies here. We're comparing apples and oranges. In order to begin to implement this policy, the search and seizure, you have to have a reason to stop a vehicle. You have to have probable cause. You cannot stop somebody, and one of the things young police officers are shocked by when they become police officers is that they can't just stop a car because they want to stop it and ask the guy to see his license. Well, you're driving a car, I should be able to see his license. No, you have to have a reason. You have to have a tail light out, a speeding, a stop sign, something, some reason, some articulable probable cause. So you can't stop the car if you don't have probable cause. Any policy regarding profiling needs to be in that vein, not in the search and seizure vein, because a probable cause has to happen before you can even begin to search someone. And to think about profiling in with search and seizure policy is really going beyond the pale. And I think we need to remember that. And the officers are so inundated with law and what they need to pay attention to in this policy that trying to mix in something else in there is just going to cloud and I think eventually weaken this. So if the policy somewhere else states, and I'm sure it does, we haven't seen it, that profiling is not permitted in this department. I know every officer that works out here knows it's the bane of law enforcement to begin to think about that. Hopefully that's not happening, and if it is, then that should be somewhere else. It should not be permitted for any reason, regardless whether it's a vehicle or a person or anything. But this has to be separate, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Kaylin?
Thanks for a good meeting.
Katie?
Just a couple things. I just want to say that unless I misunderstand things, I think usually when you have a subcommittee, the subcommittee is the one that you want to wrestle substantially with the issues that you're dealing with, come up with their best product, and bring it to the whole body. But when they do that, they come with it knowing that it can still be altered and changed, and there's nothing wrong with that happening. That's just part of the way. We have a lot of different points where we can improve and make things better. And the other thing is, and I think it's hard, especially when people have very strong opinions and views, and they have pictures in their minds of who they're trying to get a voice for. I just think we all have to, especially on issues that affect public safety, have to have a lot of respect for people having differences of opinion, and that differences of opinion make a better whole. And so it's perfectly okay for people around the table to have differences of opinion, and then at some point you just have to live with the results of the body's decision, and it moves on to the chiefs. But I think the thing that we all have to be really careful of, whether it's in a subcommittee or it's around this table, that we understand we're all on the same side, that we're trying to make good policies for the community, and so it's important for us to be able to really be respectful of strongly held different points of view, and that's true everywhere in the city, as everybody knows. So that.
Thank you. Chief, you have any?
I would like to share a little bit with all of you. First of all, I really want to thank you all for your hard work, because none of you are being paid to be here, being paid to be on the subcommittees, and I know how fascinating the work is, and I also know how demanding it can be. So I appreciate everything that you're doing. It's really important to me, in the interest of good government, that the police commission and the police department are in sync and working in concert, because when we're not, it's going to create a lot of work for your police department. Mm-hmm. And I've already said that, but just to reiterate, the same staff who are going to help me put a policy into place that we need to have right now are the same ones that you're using to do your analysis and come up with your conclusions and provide your recommendations. So I just ask that you keep that in mind when you set out timelines for what you want to achieve. And I genuinely do thank you for the very thoughtful work that you're doing.
Carter, you have anything?
I just wanted to just logistically point out that the Policy Screening and Review Committee has one meeting scheduled end of September, September 27th, and in order to get any materials that are coming to them early, it would be fabulous if I had them by the 20th. Then I can post it on the 21st. And then we have 1 week after that before the commission meeting, so the PSRC has one meeting right now to deal with whatever it is that's coming up. Just wanted to make sure y'all had that date, 20th.
Thank you. I know that some of you indeed took me on the challenge to go on ride-alongs, and although I don't have time at this point to listen to your experience, but I may ask you to talk about it at the next meeting. So what I like hearing about tonight is people's willingness to be able and make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And that's something that I'm going to continue to encourage. In some cases, it's a matter of timeliness. In some cases, the Police Commission needs to and has sent the policies out for comment. I don't want to, because Mayor Kitty Pearson mentioned the police auditor, which is great, that they have a lot of things to say. I will continue to try to find the balance. To me, the balance is inviting somebody like the ACLU because the police auditor, although very important, they're not the only experts. And so I want to make sure that while we're talking about all that, I want to make sure we have that kind of balance. And all of you, including me, of course, understand that we want to hear your feedback. And there are specific time frames that we have to include written comments on the packet, even for the committee itself. And then we have to kind of stick with to the best of our abilities. We don't have to set ourselves for and be directed by deadlines, even by the chief. He already said. But there will be some times that they have to move on. They already have. So I want to make sure that you understand that piece. Tamara?
First, I want to say how pleased I am with our new commissioners being so active and so engaged in the police commission's work already, just right out of the gate. And Mary did a great service to us appointing our new members, and I really appreciate that. I normally, when I feel like I'm on a committee and I feel like there wasn't the committee obviously felt that it had no further work to do on this policy, or they wouldn't have voted to forward it, or at least the majority of members of the committee. I normally wouldn't be entertaining or making a motion to send it back to committee, because I agree with what Caitlin said about, this is the appropriate place for folks who were not on the committee to see the policy, and normally by the time it gets to the full commission, especially an important policy, the commission has heard updates from the committee and seen drafts of the policy previously and had the opportunity to comment. We do have some new commissioners, and so, perhaps that was a bit out of step, and that's why, in this case, because the policy is so important and it is a critical policy for the department, I'm supportive of that and hope that a good policy will come forward for our October meeting.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate your point of view, and I'm really glad that we have an opportunity to take a closer look at this policy. And beyond that, on October 1st, the day of the prevention convention, and that evening at 7:30 at the Wildish Theater in Springfield, Autism Rocks is presenting a guy named Mike Guido, who's a stand-up comic who has older daughters in their early 20s, I think, with autism. And he's doing this stand-up show that's half comedy, half tragedy, and 100% inspiration. So if any of you all have been curious about what the life of a parent is of a child with pretty severe autism, this sounds like a really fun way to find out. So it's October 1st at the Wildish Theater. Tickets at kindtree.org.
That's it. Jesse?
I'm glad we're going to be looking at this policy in the PSRC, and I would encourage all of the commissioners to look at it. This is where liberty meets the streets, the poorest and the richest person, where the guy with the gun who represents the government gets to look in your backpack, your house, your car, your pockets. I don't think there's anything a whole lot more important than this, so hopefully everybody does take a serious interest in this. Not that you wouldn't, but I did hope that the whole commission would have a discussion and we wouldn't just have a recommended do pass the way it is without a whole lot of questions. So thanks.
Tim?
Well, it's been a very interesting meeting. I think it's important, especially in something like this, it's important to get it right if you possibly can. I find myself torn between what the chief's saying is he's got some things that he needs to put in place, and we certainly do not want to waste police resources trying to having to do something twice. And deadlines are important to meet and try to get those, but I tend to err on the side of caution when something is this important. And I would hope that this is, and I know that the chief talked about having to maybe do the work twice, but the way it sounds, the policies in the police department aren't set in stone, that they get changed, and that it's a living, breathing document. It's not a here's what it is all the time. It has to go through this whole series to get something changed. The chief, when he sees something that needs to get done immediately, that he's not going to wait to get that done until a year later when somebody can approach it. He's going to do it right then. So I think it's important to get it right, and hopefully you won't have to expend double the resources on some of the other policies that are stacked up behind it.
Thank you, Jim. Lieutenant Feldman, you'd like to say something?
Nothing this evening,
Thank you. And Mark?
No, I'm good.
Bernadette, close us up.
If I saw drafts on this, I was remiss and I didn't forward those on to Mark because it kind of took me by surprise. I guess that August break sort of thing. I think it probably is better for the Office of Police Auditor to speak at a committee level as opposed to the commission level, because if we're trying, as Juan Carlos has mentioned several times, that the ACLU has a voice, I think if the ACLU is going to be brought into it at the committee level, then as an expert on one side, I think we should be having the experts on the other side of the committee level rather than here, just so we look balanced in the appropriate places. I think with school starting, I just ask everybody to be careful as they're driving, especially with all the construction going on 18th. There's lots of kids that are biking and walking to school, especially with nice weather, and mean parents like me that make them walk and bike to school as much as possible. So please just watch out for kids, drive carefully. And tomorrow there is a event over at the Hilton in ballroom something, investiture of 3 New Lane County Circuit Court judges. So if anybody's interested in watching something that doesn't happen very often, stop on over.
Cara, can you remind us when do you need the feedback or any of the materials to you? Is it 20th?
I think, yeah.
One of those judges is Bernadette's husband.
That was
September 20th for the next PSRC.
Excuse me. So, commissioners, if you want to send any kind of feedback about the policy, it needs to go into Carter by the 20th. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much for your time.